Welcome back to the Boy to Man podcast, where we help you go from boy to man in mind, body, heart, and soul through the stories and experiences of the men who have done it. And today I have a very symbolic and full circle guest, Brendan Quinlan, who went from knocking doors down in South Florida after traveling all the way from Regina to running the largest residential pest control company in all of Canada, the largest door-to-door company, point blank, in Canada. And I had the opportunity to sit down with him after actually working for him 5 years ago. And so in this episode, we go over the ins and outs of what it took to actually scale from literally knocking doors himself to actually managing over 700 employees. What that takes as a man to move from being a boy, going down, not knowing what to do, to actually being the leader of such a large organization. We talk about why you need to actually get into business with your partner if you want to have a successful relationship, and how that's actually the best thing to have a loving, lasting relationship, and what the mark of a top performer looks like. We talk about the traits that a top performer actually goes through, specifically young men. Again, this guy's had the experience to go through thousands of reps of seeing what it means to be a top performer. And last but not least, we just go through what it takes to build a 700-person company. So all that and more on the Boy to Man podcast. Let's dive in. You've had hundreds, if not thousands, of young men come through your doors and work for you on what I would call one of the toughest jobs. Yeah. What are the three traits of the top performers for door-to-door sales reps?
I think the first one that jumps out, and I told you this while we were in Tulum, is just that they know that they are doing this. Like, they've decided, they haven't been talked into it by a friend. When I think back about some of the most successful people that we've had, their conviction is there, where they're just like, hey, I'm going to go do this crazy thing. How do I do it? And it's kind of like they're interviewing you as opposed to the other way around. You're not trying to recruit them. They're just like trying to sell you on letting them go do it. There's also some questions that are common that I've identified, and it's, what has your top person made? Like, what's the record? I think that's like, okay, this person's coming into this with like the right mindset. And then the other things are, it's just one of those 1%er annoying jobs where you have to get 1% better every approach and every sales demo. And so it's usually the people that are committed and consistent. The number one trait is consistency to be successful in sales. And with the people who are consistent with their habits off of the doors and off of the job are usually the people that are most consistent in the job. So I would say that it's conviction, consistency. Is there a third C? I think it would probably be confidence. And if it is those three things, they usually hit the ground running quite quickly. And those would be the top three traits that we would look for when we try and select somebody into the program.
It's interesting. How much do you think that transition out of door-to-door and just into success in life?
I mean, I think that there's a direct correlation between success in our program and in what is next. Like, I just see that all the time. If somebody can handle this, they can handle what's next, and it's usually a little bit easier. But so yeah, I think that there's a direct correlation between success in our program and success in life and relationships and communicating with others and being able to hold yourself accountable and understand delayed gratification and be focused on not the here and now, but the future. And for somebody who can manage themselves, the natural path or the natural step after this is starting their own business of some sort. And that's commonly what I see, is it's not that you do this to be good at sales. You do this because you want to be entrepreneurial.
The first one you mentioned, conviction, as I was driving over here, I was listening to a philosopher's note from one of my mentors, Brian Johnson, which you totally should check out.
Cool.
And the book title was called Burn the Boats.
Yeah.
As soon as you said that, instantly just made me remind of it. And I keep coming back to that concept. I've been enamored with it ever since I've learned about the concept of burn the boats, because I felt like I've been like that my whole life of, okay, if it's the next thing, like I'm just dropping whatever was in my past.
Yeah.
And I just love the idea of burning the boats, because as soon as, and for anyone that doesn't, know what the concept is, it was actually from, I don't know his full name, but it was something Cortez, from my understanding. He basically brought all of his troops onto this island And as soon as they got onto the island, he instructed a couple of them to literally burn the boats and say, gents, we're either going to win this war or we're going to die. One or the other. We're not going home anymore. And now, fast forward, scientists have actually proven what you're saying of just like when there's no other way out, time and time again, the individual that has their back up the wall against the wall is actually at an advantage.
Oh, yeah. And it's funny that you quote that because for the last 5 years, a credo of one of our regions has been burn the boats.
Really?
It's everywhere and everything that they do because that's their approach. I mean, the way that salespeople who participate in the program will approach it is I'm going away to war. And they use that analogy because it is leaving home, going and living with everybody else that you work with for the summer, going to a new city. And it's just like they're there to burn the boats. And so that's a huge, I don't want to say belabored, but it is. I mean, we just use it all the time because it's one of the, again, banner expressions or phrases that you'll find with our island region, which is Quinn Paul's region.
Yeah. So obviously an interesting component is that I was at one point one of your reps.
Yes.
And I traveled. And one of the things that caught my attention with you was that I got to literally go out and live in Vancouver.
Yeah.
And I'm originally from Peterborough, Ontario. We're literally halfway across the country, if not, pretty much fully across the country at that point. I knew no one but the reps that I was placed in the house with. You mentioned an interesting point. I believe that all men should leave their hometown. Do you agree with that?
I mean, when you grow up in Regina, Saskatchewan, 1,000%. And before you do it, you don't understand how important it is to your growth. Because in your hometown, at least in my hometown, which is a smaller community, and it feels even smaller than it really is, you have so many commitments, obligations, and responsibilities. And when you move out of your hometown and you're singularly focused on one thing, your productivity explodes. And it is one of those things where, again, focusing on yourself when you're a young man can be super important to your success. But if you're getting pulled in so many different directions, like most students are when they're in university, I know I was on too many rec teams, too many clubs. I had a full-time course load. I was bartending at the Keg. Wow. You throw all of that together and you're not ever focused on yourself. When I got this job for the first time to go work in Florida for the summer, it was just like, hey, I was all in on one thing and the productivity just absolutely exploded. It was the biggest change that I possibly could have made in a positive way for myself was to leave my hometown and get away from the distractions and the negative influences that existed from my younger years. I mean, the negative influences in my hometown, I mean, still when I go back, I pay for it for several days after because of the lifestyles that, my friends still live, which is nothing against that, but it just wasn't what I wanted. And completely removing yourself from it and surrounding yourself with people that want the same things that you do, get ahead, be focused, go to the gym, it just allows you to be more efficient at those things.
Wow. It's really one of the, for me, it sounds like for you, one of the biggest life-defining moments so far in my life was leaving my hometown.
Yep.
And then specifically my literal Providence and flying, because that was a huge shift.
Yeah.
You're fully severed. It's not a 2-hour drive back to mom's house, 2-hour drive back to my old friend group, and I can make it work. It's like, no, you're severed. And same thing for you, like from Regina to Florida. Yeah. Bit of a different scene, right?
It's a different culture, and that was really eye-opening as well. I mean, Saskatchewan comes from a climate politically even, just that a lot of the infrastructure there and a lot of the commerce there is crown corporations, and the free market is not as exciting in Saskatchewan as it is in Florida. And I just remember seeing that tremendous wealth for the first time and talking to people that had experienced that success on the doors and their $10 million mansions in Florida on the beach. I mean, there wasn't one house that I didn't leave, and this was my classic thing that I would do on every single sales approach. I'd just be like, hey, I just got to ask, all due respect, but you live in a palace, and how did you achieve this? And would you have any advice for me just starting out in life and just trying to get ahead in terms of what I can do? The best advice was this older gentleman, and he was holding a cigar, and he was in a mansion. And I don't know if I can cuss on this show, but you can hopefully
100% you can.
edit it. Yeah. And he said, son, this is America, if you apply yourself, you're going to get fucking rich. And that was so motivational and inspirational because it was just so direct, the advice. And it was just like, fired me up. Like, I was just like, wow, he's right. Because I looked at what I could earn. I looked at what I was earning. And I was studying to be a teacher in Saskatchewan. Again, not exposed to the business world. I couldn't get accepted into the University of Regina, which was pretty embarrassing for me. So I had to go into the education and learn how to be a teacher. And yeah, I mean, it was just like, I didn't know that things like this existed. I didn't know that if you really applied yourself, if you're really focused on, your profession, and I stopped trading my time for money and I started trading my results for money, it was just like the biggest possible epiphany. I became obsessed with America and just getting established there and building a business and a life there and getting a visa there. It was the first time that I left my hometown, and it was just like a truly life-changing experience.
Wow, that's incredible. I don't know if you've ever seen those Instagram reels or those TikToks of the School of Hard Knocks guy where he goes up to the people and is like, what do you do for a living?
Yes, that was me.
Dude, I was just going to say, man, this is like the OG right here of what do you do for a living?
Dude, it was so revealing. And again, I would, anyone who was willing to talk, even if they didn't want to buy, I would just pick their brain and try and learn. And the question that I actually learned from Mike Fata when I was visiting him in Winnipeg is, well, the question that I always used to ask was, can I pick your brain? And he said, hey, maybe consider changing that to, if you were in my position, what would you do? And so I wish that I'd been framing it that way back then.
Maybe a bit of a higher success rate.
Yeah, I think so. But, the people that were willing to talk to me, and so many people were, and just willing to give just unlimited free advice, like I learned so much. I learned more just from random people at their houses than I did from my 4-year degree in university. And I felt like I was truly getting a business education, talking to business people every single day, 100 of them per day.
Wow.
And I just felt like people are willing to share.
I was just going to ask, like, if I'm a young guy, right, I know this was the case for me, and still sometimes, like, I catch myself, but now I have at least courage and discipline to still go ahead and make the ask.
Yeah.
When I was a young dude, I was so scared to just ask.
Yeah.
So, like, did you find, for everyone listening, like, did you find a lot of them were pretty open, especially, like, the more successful individuals?
Yeah, for sure. I did find that. But again, I mean, I signed up to go knock doors. Yeah. And so the fear of asking goes away. Yeah. And that's one of the biggest takeaways from it. I mean, you're not afraid of rejection at all. Because when you get rejected 99 times per day, I mean, what's one more? And so you're just... And it's truly like amazing how transformational that will be once you don't fear losing at all. And once that goes away the only way that can go away is from so many different losses in so many different ways. But when you don't fear that at all, you don't fear taking risk at all. And it almost is a little bit confusing to me when some of our business partners will see the negative outcome before the positive outcome. And it's a classic, like, hey, think about what all the bad things that could happen. I'm just like, think about all the good things that could happen, dude. Like, so I think that's one of those things that, again, once you get rid of that fear of rejection, and you do that by repetition, and you do that by getting told no a lot, and you learn better ways to ask. And, again, I'm still learning better ways to ask. Shout out Mike Fata on that one. And the more focused you are on your delivery and on your communication skills, the easier and the better you'll be at being able to get the information that you want out of people. But it starts with doing it poorly and learning over time how to do it better.
So good. So the question that Mike gave you, because I think this is a great one, because I personally don't like getting my brain picked either. Yeah. I don't think anyone does, you know?
No, it's a bad
just
way
the
to put
frame.
it.
It's just the frame.
Totally.
It's like, dude, Yeah. Or hey, like, let me grab you a coffee. Like, also a nice gesture and still same thing. It's just like for the guy that's getting the question asked to, it's like, okay, I need to drive to this place. I need to plan around this. Like, in a digital world that just becomes so inefficient. Yeah. So what was the question?
Yeah. If you were in my shoes, what would you do? And you present your situation, you lay it all out. And to me, it was just like, I'm an immigrant from Canada. I'm from Regina, Saskatchewan. You probably never heard of it. You probably got some funny jokes to say about where I'm from. And they always did. Everyone's from their son. And then they would usually get into, again, like, here's some things early that I think you can do moving to the United States. Here's some things early that you can do living in Florida. Here's some things to know about Florida. Here's some things to know about the business, climate, and everything that's happening here. Now, very interestingly, when I moved to Florida, it was 2008, and this was housing market crash.
Okay.
So everybody's just like, dude, money is everything. Like, just stand, like, you're going to get rich no matter what you do. And then the second year I went back to Florida in 2009, it was a completely different environment. The housing market had completely crashed. And it was interesting because in 2008, when I would canvas in very nice neighborhoods, $600,000 homes. But in Florida, that's a mansion back then. Mm-hmm. And I would ask people in some of the neighborhoods, hey, what do you do for a living? Because I asked no matter what. And a lot of the folks that lived in those houses were like, oh, yeah, I work at Walmart. And I work as a clerk at Walmart or a greeter at Walmart. And that's when it was just like, wow, America is an insane place. Like, how can they afford this? And, the next year coming back the next summer, it was like, oh, they can't.
Yeah.
And all of those houses that I previously canvassed had been completely abandoned. And the grass had grown up around the outside of the house. People were looting it. And I was out there trying to sell them residential services. Most of the houses were abandoned. People thought I was looting the houses because that was a major problem in Florida when the housing market crashed. And it was just so wild to see like what a crazy place the United States is in terms of boom or bust. Mm-hmm. Not to carry on, but one of the next places we went to do this business was West Texas. And there's no place in America that's more boom or bust than that. And it was the same story. The price of oil is up. Everybody's flush with cash. The price of oil drops. Everybody loses everything and moves towns.
Wow. And
it's just a different perspective that people take on entrepreneurship. And again, that neutralized the fear out of me. It was like, dude, think about those Florida people. They were willing to take massive risks for themselves. Mm-hmm. And people where I'm from in Saskatchewan, you don't take risks. It's a very, very conservative approach to life. And being exposed to, and not that, I decided to live my life recklessly, but I did decide, hey, what's the worst that could happen by taking a lot of these risks? Seeing people that did it, seeing the different mindset of people in Texas and Florida, which are incredibly risk-averse people, generally speaking. And it just opened my eyes to like, hey, again, like, the downside or what the worst that could happen is just really comparatively to, again, seeing people in boom and bust scenarios. It's not that for me. Like, worst case scenario, I move home to Regina. I live in my mom's basement for a while. I get on my feet. I start teaching school, and I'm fine. So why not take massive risks? Because the worst case scenario is a little embarrassing, but it's not like I can't feed myself.
I love that. I've been the same way. I do attribute a lot of my success to that right now.
Yeah.
It's just moving quick, having zero care for what people think. I think that's the biggest thing.
For sure.
Because, okay, I fail. It's not that you're in that bad of a position, but it's like, what is everyone else going to think? I think a lot of guys are caught up in that, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But no, I totally agree. The one thing I double tap on around moving out of your hometown is you release this mold from you. Like for me, I lived in Peterborough up until I was 18.
Yeah.
One of the big things for me was like I used to be a really picky eater. This is how I actually like identified this.
Yeah.
I used to be a really picky eater. And then everyone in my family and then all my relatives for 18 years of my life knew Cam as the picky eater.
Yep.
He's like, Cam's not going to eat that. What do you want, Cam? You're not going to eat anything here, right? And then when I wanted to actually make changes, I felt burdened to go through the change of the identity that the external world had put on me. 100%. So when I left, all of a sudden I was just like, I'm this whole new guy. I have a blank slate. I can do whatever I want, And all of a sudden I had this craving to just try a bunch of stuff out because no one knew me.
Yep.
No one knew that Cam was a picky eater. No one knew that Cam used to do X and Y. So I'm like, I have a fresh start. Did you feel that?
Oh yeah, 100%. Because again, my beliefs about myself and what I was capable of were very limited, especially from my school experience where I struggled all the way through school. Didn't get into the business school at the University of Regina, and the successful people did. And that was very difficult for me. And leaving my hometown and not being viewed as somebody that was not good in school or wasn't going to be successful or, didn't come from tremendous wealth or anything like that. Like, again, it just was a chance to reinvent who I was, reinvent myself, reinvent all of my habits. And that's super powerful. And starting fresh, that clean slate, I'll never forget it. Like, you show up, new town, you go get your apartment set up, You go to the grocery store for the first time, and it's like I get to restart all of the decisions that are negative. There's not going to be 1 ounce of junk food in this house. There's not going to be one mistake that we make. There's not going to be a drip of alcohol in this house. And those decisions starting fresh when you move away for the first time, holy, is it ever groundbreaking what you can accomplish. I went, for me, in Saskatchewan, I went never more than a weekend or 2 without drinking alcohol to excess. And in Florida, I went the first 90 days that I was there without drinking a drop. And those little things or those little life changes I guess that could be considered a large life change. I mean, those will just completely skyrocket what you're capable of doing. And then the confidence comes from that, because when you start to string together some good days where you just again, left it all out there, you work out, you work all day, you maybe get some extra things that you're doing for yourself, whatever they might be, whether it's just meal prepping or whatever your routine is. Again, that just builds your confidence daily so that you realize that, hey, I'm a disciplined person. And once you start to see yourself, and again, our company, it's so measured, your success, and it's so measurable. It was just so easy for me to just look at what I had done, continue to stack it, continue to look for ways to optimize my sales approaches, get better, and make more money and be more focused. And yeah, I mean, what you said is so true too. I mean, if you do something that's different, and when you're from Regina and you sign up to go knock doors and sell pest control in Florida, that is nobody's ever done that before. That is from your hometown. Everyone thinks it's a scam. So they're like, good luck, see you in a week when you're broke. Yeah, I mean, that would be what prevented a lot of people for doing it with me. Because when I signed up to go do this, I thought all my friends were going to want to come.
Wow.
I was like, dude, I found the coolest thing. We get to go live in Florida. Yeah. My friends are like, dude, that is 100% a scam. Like, don't do that. That's a really bad idea. And I could convince not one person, except for an associate from Winnipeg that I knew, and that was Jordan Earl, who I work with to this day. Wow. He was the only person open-minded enough to even consider it. Now, my close to him was like, dude, think about the girls. And that was that got him. Yeah. But once we got him down there, it was the same thing with him. He got a chance to reinvent himself, and he, was overweight at the time. He lost a ton of weight, got in perfect shape. Yeah. And we just really bettered ourselves all summer. It was all we were focused on.
Wow. Look at that. And changed identity, moved cities. Yeah. And now, obviously, both of you guys have had, quite the success, which paints a crazy gap in the minds, right? Like we started this podcast off, I intro you and say, hey, this guy's gone from doing college pro all the way up to running a company where you're managing it's 500 reps or so, right? Yeah, 500 reps across Canada. Yeah. Not just even a state, not a province, but across Canada, 500 reps. And when I started, I know, and this is the one thing that just blows my mind, is like, you guys just entered into Canada. Yeah. I think you were in 3 cities. I think it was Vancouver, Toronto, and maybe one other place. There's maybe 30 of us total, across the whole thing. Yep. So you not only went from being just one of the door knockers to then opening up your own company in Canada, across company, and now managing 500. That's a pretty big gap. Yeah. So where do we get to? How do we, on a broad stroke, how, especially in the early stages, how did you continue to make those steps? What character traits, if you were to look back on, allowed you to actually go from just a door knocker to actually running the company, and a large one at that? Yeah, taking risks and being okay with losing, because we lost a lot. Again, just to be from 1 rep to, we're actually a team of 700 now. We have 500 salespeople for the summer, and we have 200 full-time staff. Holy. And so that jump requires a ton of just failure throughout, and it's that classic image of the person showing the path to success being anything but linear. And so it was. It was so many mistakes and learning things the hard way, and that's maybe not the best way to do it, but we learned through doing and taking great risks. And I started my own pest control company for the first time when I was 24, and I moved to Austin, Texas to start the company by myself. I bought a truck and was a one-man band, spraying, selling, answering the phone after the fact. I'd try and disguise my voice so they didn't know it was also me who answered the phones at this place. But it was just one of those things where, it was taking hard lessons, trying to get better over time, taking huge risks, and a lot of which did not pan out. And that was okay because, again, we never put ourselves in a position where we couldn't keep going. And so the cool thing about this business is, hey, if you have a binder, you're good to go. And that's all you need. The cost or the barrier to entry is fairly low. And
it's duplicatable. So if you're a good teacher and leader, you can teach other people what you've learned yourself, and then they can go apply it. And a lot of the time, they're going to be better than you were at it. And I've been very fortunate to attract incredible partners that are just like way more talented than me. And they've been able to build businesses that, you know, I'm a part of, that's part of our company, a lot quicker than I could. And some of that is from some of the mistakes I made. And that was the importance of those failures. It's like when somebody calls me and I think they have a horrible idea, I can just tell them, hey, here's what happened when I did that. And if I were in your shoes, I might consider doing it this way. So I think that when you have those skins on the wall, when you have those experiences and those stories that you can share with the people who you're mentoring and leading and training, you're more relatable and you're a better leader from having lived it. And there's no doubt that I lived it. I mean, I've done this industry now for 19 years, 10 years now in Canada. And when we started in Canada, it was just my brother and my wife. Nobody else was interested in joining up. I tried everyone, and we had hundreds of reps that work for us in the U.S. over the years. I called every single one of them, and nobody was interested. The only reason my brother and wife were interested is because I had to force them. I was just like, we're going to go try this, we're going to go do this. And yeah, the first day, the first hour of trying this in Canada, because it didn't exist the way that we do business here. Just moving our industry from a one-off to a subscription didn't exist in Canada, and going out and selling it door to door definitely didn't exist. And so it's like, okay, how will this go? Well, first hour, I made 6 sales, which is a huge amount. Like typically you'd be happy to make 1 or 2 per day. So I made 6 sales in the first hour in Mineola Road in Mississauga, not more than half an hour from here. And then my brother and wife were like, okay, I'm going to get out the car too. They also crushed it that first night. And then we started calling people and we're just like, hey, this is happening. Like, you won't believe how easy it is to sell in Canada compared to the United States, which was saturated and competitive. And then it just started to explode and build. And the question kept becoming like, can this work in Vancouver though? So then we went out there, and as you know, it worked. Then it's like, okay, but not Calgary, right? It's too cold. It worked. Then Edmonton. And every city, there's a lot of doubts and a lot of people, you know, saying like, dude, that won't work there. That model's not going to be effective there. And again, the proof of concept is usually something that I was focused on proving myself so that other people would believe. So with Canada, it was like, okay, I got to go prove that this can happen here and this will work here. And then with every new market, it was the same thing. But then once you have other people who are proving concept for you and you can focus and be more focused on their success, that was what I truly wanted. Because at the heart of like what I do and who I am, I think that I'm a teacher. That's what I studied formally to be. And it's like, I want to focus on teaching and training and working with these people to get them better. Because I was better at that than I ever was at sales personally.
Wow. A lot's coming up. One, just to recap, like some of those key things that has gotten you to where you were. Is, like, fear of failure, just throwing that out the window. Yeah. I think that's huge, and that's now come up a few times. Yeah. And I'm, again, same thing. Like, that's one of the things my mom continues to tell me is like, I don't get how you, like, do the thing, screw it up, but then just act like it didn't even happen and just go on in that, like, right? So I think that's a huge one. Yeah. Another one is just taking risk as well, which is kind of off the back of fear of failure, right? Obviously, failure is, you know, looming if risk is being taken. But I think huge risk, especially, again, if the young guys that are listening, like, this is when you take risk. Like,
totally.
Yeah. My journal prompts for myself, whether it's just mentally or I write it out, is if something's like really bothering me or if I'm like anxious about something that I need to go and do, I always try to get down to, but will I die? You know?
I love that.
And it's just like, okay, you know, will you lose your business? No. Okay. Will you, right? And you can just work backwards. And it normally starts out like, will I die? No. Okay. Will I lose my business? No. Will I, you know, lose my clients for this? Will my family hate me? Like, and you can just, whatever matters to you, you can just like go to the extreme and just work backwards. And you're just like, oh wait, like, I'm good. Fine. You know, even if I did go bankrupt, I'm still good. Yeah. And I think, and a lot of the time it's never actually as bad as it seems. No. Right? It's all in our head. Yeah. So I love that, just taking major risk. Yeah. And then the next thing I heard at the last part is just like leading by example.
Yeah, that's huge. That's huge. And so that's one of the core principles that we teach. And so there's some easy, like low-hanging fruit leadership things that you can establish with the people that you work with right off the bat. It's funny because I learned this playing high school football in Regina. I was the quarterback on my football team, and so believe it or not, high school football actually like is people like follow it who aren't even in high school.
I love that.
So the media comes out and they interview you. Yeah. And the best advice I got when dealing with the media, when they're interviewing you for your high school football stuff, is anytime there's anything good that happens or your team wins, you give away all of the credit. And so you've probably seen that like with professionals, like Tom Brady is the perfect example of that. When they interview Tom Brady, whenever his team wins, it's all about the receivers and the O-line and the defense. So he's giving away the credit to the teammates that are on his team. When they lose or when anything goes bad, you have to accept all of the blame. And I think it's so easy for young people or for anyone to deflect when something doesn't go that way. So it's fine to take risks, and it's fine to, again, not fear failure. But when it does go bad, and it's going to, as the leader of the group, you have to take all of the fault and the blame. And you'll find sometimes that people will come to your defense when you do that. And that is when you've just really bought in some of the people that work with you, because they're like, no, I could have done this better, and I should have done that. And so it just presents that, again, extreme ownership that you take on your company and the people who sign up to work for it. Because from a recruiting standpoint, if you're going to convince somebody to work with you, you had better be an awesome leader. And the way that you lead them is, again, by example. Your words mean virtually nothing, and your actions mean absolutely everything. And people will watch everything you do. And if you want them to be a reflection of you, which probably you do, you have to model the exact behavior that you want to see. You can't just ask them to do it, because those are two completely different things. And the second that you contradict yourself or you look like a hypocrite, your ability to lead just evaporates. It's gone.
The craziest part, what I was thinking about as soon as you're saying all that, was that all applies to you leading yourself.
Yeah. Again, it just does. It just starts with you.
Yeah.
And again, so that's why it makes sense to start as a solopreneur, where it's just like, okay, I'm going to go try this thing, and I'm going to prove the concept, and I'm going to model the behavior that the first people who come on board for this thing, exactly what they're going to do. And I'm not going to tell them what they can do. I'm going to show them what I've done, and I'm going to teach them the way to do that themselves. And the best thing that can happen is that they start to surpass you, and then you, again, have just attracted the right type of person. And I think that just leads to overall company success if you can do that.
Yeah, actions over words is just everything. And again, I just can't help but think back to the individual, right? Like if you're trying to lead yourself, like just don't try to tell yourself, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and keep saying it. Especially, again, one of the things I know I used to do a ton was I would tell all my friends, I'm going to go do this and this and this and that. Right? It's like, just go and do it.
Yeah.
Actually, I have Marcus Aurelius has a great quote on that. It's like, spend something along the lines of, spend no time arguing about what a good man is, be one.
Love that.
Right? And that just goes for, insert whatever, insert entrepreneur, insert door-to-door sales guy, insert, husband, father, etc. Just go and be it, right? Stop talking about it. Because you're just going to continue to give yourself less and less trust the more you talk about it, the less you do it.
Yeah, no, that's it. And you have to lift the lid and set the pace. The speed of the group is set by the speed of the leader. And so again, especially in our industry, which is so measurable and you can see the results and it's so visual, everybody knows what everyone else has sold. That's by design. You have to be at the top of the sales board if people are going to want to hear advice from you. The least effective sales managers in our space are the ones who put their feet up on the desk, push paper around, and be like, dude, back in my day, I used to sell a ton, and you should do these things, and maybe you could sell what I used to sell. I lost a lot of credibility as a leader when I no longer was selling myself. And so that was a big jump for me and a big adjustment. And I felt it. Like, I'd be like, well, yeah, one thing I used to do back in 2008, and reps who were born around that year are looking at me like I'm crazy. So you lose that credibility if you're not actively doing it. And so the reason I actually personally sold for 13 years, which was longer than I recommend anyone do, but the reason I did that is so that I had that credibility and I could go and talk from experience and just be able to show my results and not talk about my old war stories. And that's just so much more effective.
Yeah, I can say I've been blessed knocking doors with you.
Oh, God.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you know what people learn? Sorry to jump in.
Yeah.
People learn that it's like, he's nothing special. Like, he's just a guy. And you have this, like, myth about you a little bit. If you're the top producer, it's like he gets the best neighborhoods and he gets the best opportunities. And, when somebody goes out and shadows somebody, it's the best part is that they're not blown away. It's like, oh, wow, I can do that. And that is so easy for you to turn around and teach them because they've just watched you do it, completely shadowed it. And it's a simple way to teach and train. And it's a I do, we do, you do, which is just super easy model. It's just like you completely demo it, they just watch it. And after you debrief, then you do one together. So it's like, hey, let's practice this, whatever it is, together. And then lastly, they do it and you give them feedback. And that's just such a natural way to train on any skill. And it's just a good way to get somebody started. But you have to do a really good job of modeling it the first time because that forever, in a lot of ways, will be how they approach that task.
Yeah, that's interesting. In coming back to, again, you go do the one-man band. I'm imagining literally the one-man band classic, right? Like, because you're sprayer on the backpack,
Dude,
truck,
on the phone,
right?
like, oh God.
I love that. Yeah. There was clearly a point where you were able to go, okay, this isn't just me. This is now a bigger thing, et cetera.
Yeah.
But what I'm curious about that is on the backside of that, you've at some point went from boy to man. Like you could have very well been knocking doors and still felt like a boy. I don't know at what point that was for you. Like when did you feel like, wow, like I'm really doing it. I'm not just a boy from Regina anymore. Like I'm a man out exploring the world and building a life for myself. Do you have like a moment where you felt like you flipped the switch?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And I think it was when we had to borrow $50,000 to make payroll.
What year was this?
This was 2012 or 2011.
Okay.
And we actually were stiffed on the back end from the company that we marketed for. And they decided that they weren't going to pay us. They were in financial trouble. They were going bankrupt. And so the company that we signed up to work for went bankrupt. So we decided to still pay our sales reps, even though we weren't getting the pay from the company that we marketed for, but we also didn't have the money to do it.
Wow.
But we knew that our reputation was everything in our industry. So even just for selfish reasons, but also for unselfish reasons, we decided the best decision was to pay the salespeople. So we had to call my business partner, Jordan Earl's father, and ask for $50,000. And that was like that step where it's just like, all right, I never want to feel like a boy who has to do that ever again. So I'm going to do whatever I have to ensure that I'm never in that position. Shout out Craig Earl. We'd be bankrupted if it wasn't for him. It's just one of those scenarios where, again, that feeling, it hurts so bad. And the pride, because I feel like I had a great relationship with Jordan Stan, and it was the most embarrassing thing to possibly do, to ask for $50,000 so you can make payroll. I mean, it burned so bad. I was just like, I'm never going to let that happen ever again. And so I think it crossed over from a horrible experience where it's just very maturing to deal with something that real. I mean, these students that we'd hired, they were depending on that money to pay for their tuition. And so faced with that kind of stress and pressure, it's just like, okay, well, I'm going to find ways to make sure that, you know, we're more diligent, that we just vet anybody who we're going to sign up to market for, that, you know, we're never going to put somebody in a position like that ever again. And I think that was just the maturation that comes from something like that is just hard to match. Just living something that's so visceral and real and painful and gut-wrenching, because then you're thinking about, like, keep in mind there's profit in there for us. Like, it was more like $150,000 that we got stiffed. And when we were at that age, that's a tremendous amount of money at that stage of the journey. Like, back-breaking money. Like, how are we going to come back from this money? And, you know, just being like, okay, well, we got screwed, but we're going to build up and we're going to get better to prevent that from ever happening again. We're going to attract better clients because our company's going to be, you know, a better level. We're going to have more salespeople, and we're going to get a legitimate contract with a legitimate company. And from that, we landed the deal with Terminex, which at the time was the biggest and oldest pest control company in the industry. And prior to that, we were marketing for little mom and pop companies, and you know, those were the ones that go bankrupt and leave you in those situations. So, yeah, I think that was a moment just where it's like, hey, like, got time to grow up. And I think from there, that happened.
Yeah, well, I love that. I love that. And that's, I think, part of the beauty of life is you get thrown into these situations that you see from afar from other stories.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, what would I do in that situation? Or I don't even know what I'd do. And then you're there, and now you're just like, hey, life's giving you, again, I loved how you framed that, because clearly you saw it as an opportunity coming out of it. Might have not felt like that at first, but then you left it saying like, wow, okay, we have some really good opportunities to stabilize, to, you know, better ourselves, get our systems better, et cetera. Yeah. And few things that come up for me, from a place of like just a self-actualizing individual growth mindset, is walking out of that and be like, great, we're going to survive. We're solutions oriented. Let's call, as embarrassing as it is, let's call someone and get the money. Yeah. Not let's just shut down shop. Oh, frig, you know, we're underwater. Yeah. Having the confidence and conviction that you're still going to get out of that. Yeah. Right. And then on top of that, it's like, we're going to, instead of making this, you know, be victims of the situation, we're actually going to be owners of the situation, taking responsibility and going and making the best out of it. On the flip side, what I see from like the boy to man side, specifically, like when you look at boy psychology, the boy is worried about what's in it for him, you know, because he can operate. If you think back to like a household, you have your parents, and the mom never gives shit to the boy, right? He can get away with anything a lot of the time. Yeah. So he's always like, well, what's in it for me? I don't really care about anyone else because I can get away with it. But then the man says, well, you know, that's nice, and like, I need to serve. I need to go beyond myself, transcend myself, and actually like serve others. And that's a perfect example, I would say. Like, I have $50,000 that I could just like not pay, right? Or I could actually go beyond myself, put myself in the deficit, and go pay these people. Yeah. I love that.
Well, hey, I mean, we still work with some of the people who got those paychecks to this day. They're actually some of the most senior people in our company.
Look at that.
So, I mean, it was a worthwhile business investment, and it's a, you know, important quote. It's my second favorite, and it's just that, you know, if you help people get what they want, you're going to ultimately get what you want yourself. And by navigating people in a position where the leadership style is like, hey, you tell me what the goal is, and my job as an accountability coach, I'm going to help you try and get there. That framing that relationship from, you know, employee to manager, or from, you know, sales leader to salesperson, I think is the only way to frame the relationship. So it's just like, my only job here is to help you reach your goals. Tell me what they are, and I will do everything in my power, servant leadership style, to hopefully help you reach them. Now, here's some of the sacrifices that I know, because I've done some of this before, that you're going to have to make. Are you willing to make some of these? And those conversations and framing that relationship that way, again, it just encourages accountability from the people that are signing up to work with you.
Yeah. Wow. I love that. That's so good. First of all, to scratch the itch for myself, and I'm sure everyone else, he's at second favorite quote.
I got to know the first one
for sure.
The first one is the Winston Churchill, and it says the definition of success, or success, is defined by moving from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm. And that one's big for me, because when you knock doors, you get told no 100 times to make one person buy. And if you take the approach of just like, you knock a door, somebody says no, and it takes a little bit out of you. You knock a door, another person says no, takes a little bit out of you. And then by that 100th person that wants to buy, but you're so deflated and feeling so bad for yourself that they're not going to buy from that. So I think that energy and that confidence of not being deflated by having negative feedback, I think that's one of the best ways to be successful. You have to move from all of your failures and learn from them, like this big one I just mentioned. Those are the things that truly make you better. It wasn't after some of our biggest wins, we're just like, time to get down to business. We're really going to focus after we sold our first couple companies. It was like, okay, we're really going to go at it this year. It was like, no, it was after our worst years that our biggest next. Actually, that incident was 2012, because 2012 was a disaster for us. We tried to overexpand. Classic mistake from a young entrepreneur. You experience some success, then it's time to take over the world. We went from being a company that existed only in Texas to then that year in 2012, and I can't even believe that this seemed like a good idea at the time, we decided to expand to Chicago, New York, and San Francisco. Wow. And then also keep our offices in Austin and Dallas. And that was a horrible idea. We were not ready for that. We didn't have the leadership in place to do something that big, and it all fell apart on us. There was just too many balls in the air and not enough people who knew how to direct traffic. 2013 was a special like banner year, and it's because we just were like, okay, time to plug in, time to lock it in. And then from that year, from 2013, there's even more people that are still working with the company today or are very good friends that I'm very connected with, because it was like a magical special year. We kind of circled the wagons. We brought a lot of the sales reps back to either Texas or California. We got rid of our East Coast stuff, which was a massive flop for us. And we just focused on building from what was like the right foundation, which I feel like takes a lot longer to build. But once you have that foundation built, the rest of the company or house in this analogy can go really quickly. But if you try and build without that foundation or your solid leadership group, it's all going to fall apart at some point. And the problem is that'll often come later down the road, and it is more of an epic failure if you don't have that foundation built the right way from the start. So we learned that the hard way in 2012, but then in 2013, it was like a banner year. Things went our way, got some of the bad luck out of the way, and just like circumstances changed. But again, that L was required for us to really do some soul searching, really look inward, really try and figure out what we could do to make the experience better for the people that were participating in it.
Wow. Yeah, to say failure is important, I think, is an understatement here.
It's everything. And it's so funny. Like, thank you so much for having me on this podcast. Yeah. The only one that I've really done similar to this in the past, I went through all of my biggest failures. That's all I talked about. And it's like the gambler. You know, they'll only tell you about their wins, but it's sometimes the losses that are most memorable to them. So I've been focused on sharing my story, actually framing it and surrounding it around the losses, because I think those are more important and people can learn more from those than they can bragging about the wins.
Yeah, I agree, man. I agree. You know, as you're saying that, and like, you know, we're really sitting in the topic of failure, the fear of failure, you know, going through it. Like, I was just even envisioning literally all of the years. Like, first of all, 19 years is a lot of years. It's a lot of years.
Do it for decades, man, if you want to be an expert at anything.
And then because one thing I find when you listen to podcasts or you listen to people talk is they give you the insight, but then to really feel where that insight's coming from, I think is the more important component to like understand the importance of the insight. You know, it's like, you got to get over failure. Okay, that's great at surface level, but then like if I got into your shoes, or if anyone listening got into your shoes and literally like envisioned you trying to set up an office, call people, hey man, come sell on this thing, and then ends up flopping, and you like promise, I'm sure you've had where you like promise guys not the world, but you promise them good money. On the East Coast, it sounds like potentially, and then it just flopped, and now you have to face the guilt or whatever, or dude, I was supposed to make all this money and da-da-da. And part of it's their responsibility, but you're going to feel responsible as an entrepreneur. And literally going through those motions, I was just going through that as you were saying, and I'm like, that's really what it takes. Year after year, I love that quote, year after year, going through failure and not losing the confidence and enthusiasm behind it. It's, wow.
And that really was, again, like, I think I found that quote, fortunately, around that time.
Otherwise, we might not be here,
Because truly, it was all of those things. I mean, you know, again, going back to accepting all of the blame if it doesn't go well. I mean, I had to do that with dozens and dozens of people. And that was very challenging. And going through that was like, it was heartbreaking, because these were people who put their faith and trust into me, and to have it not work out for them, like, it broke my heart, and I just felt so responsible for that. But there's nothing more motivational than experiencing that pain that just like absolutely fires you up to just be like, okay, I'm going to make everything better. And I've never worked, you know, before then I'd never worked like that. And it just put me in a position where I was never going to let them or anybody who signed up to do this experience that again. Unless it truly was something where they came into it with the most open eyes possible. And it actually changed the way that I framed it, because back then the pitch was like, hey, do you want to live in New York this summer and do this? You know, the job, it's tough, but like, you get to live in New York. Like, we were selling the opportunity. The way that we recruit as a company now is just like, hey, this is the hardest possible way that you can spend this summer. You will get hundreds of door slams in your face daily. Why do you want to do this? And so we used to recruit, and now we actively try and talk them out of it throughout our hiring process, so that the ownership goes into the individual. And the way we frame it is like, look, the only variable with this is you. This is a proven thing now. These are the numbers. We had a kid that was 17 years old, make $100,000 doing this as a rookie last year. Like, the proof of concept is there now. So you're the variable. Why are you going to be successful at this? And when you turn it around on people, as opposed to talking them into something and recruiting them to be a part of your brand, and you make it exclusive, where they have to sell you on why they should get to go knock doors for the summer, which again is the worst possible job. That whole relationship changes and their expectations are set so properly. And again, I learned that the hard way because there's people who I convinced to go to New York. And when it didn't work out for them, again, that's 100% my fault. And so I would never frame it to that way to anybody else in the future.
Yeah, that's so good. It's very important actually in leadership. From what I'm learning in the very early stages, is doing that very thing. It's just getting them to want to be on the bus, not paying for their ticket and be like, "Hey, there's your seat. I'm going to take care of you."
Yeah.
Speaking of that, because I do think it's important, and a lot of guys will get value from this, whether you run a business or not right now. I think inherently deep in our core, anyone that wants to self-actualize and become that best version of themselves will naturally find themselves at the doorsteps of entrepreneurship at some point. I truly believe, because it's like, the way I see it is entrepreneurship's the best self-development program out there, right? And as a result, if you want to truly become that best version of you, like you want to go and provide, transcend beyond yourself, at a certain point, you're like, okay, it's great that I can serve 1 or 2 people at a time, or like 10 people in a room, but it's like, how could I serve 100, 1,000? And then naturally it's a product or a service, and it's like, okay, entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
So I think if you don't have a business, this is still relevant for you. And if you do have a business, obviously this has been a great conversation. But the one piece that I'm really curious about, because this is where I'm at, is going from yourself, and I just brought on a partner, to then with the idea of starting to expand and have a bigger team. And like, how did you define a solid foundation? Like you're talking about it in a lot of like clarity of just like, hey, when we had this, then we started doing this. And obviously this is 2020, but looking back, like, how are you able to define that we had solid foundations from learning 2012? You fell off. Clearly we were all over the map. We overcommitted. Then you recentered. What did you do different? And then how are you able to feel confident that it's like, okay, we're not overexpanding now. We have a solid foundation. What does that look like?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I think it's difficult to answer. I mean, firstly, I want to say that you're way too modest. I mean, you're an exceptional leader, and I don't think you should say otherwise, because I just know that about you. But then to that question, I think that, again, if you spend the most time building the foundation, you'll be so much better off when you then go to scale it. So I think the time and how much time and effort you pour into your foundational people, like your partners, for us, our sales partners, which is a group of about 12 to 15 people from across Canada, they're again, so many of them have surpassed me in so many ways. And it wasn't until I saw them breaking some of the records that I had set or some of the standards that I had hit that I was like, okay, they're ready to go open up a city. And once I saw that they were capable of doing at least what I had done or more, it's like, okay, well, they're clearly ready. And part of that way is just that they have to go then prove it themselves. But the cool thing is we have such a perfect way to grow them, because they have to go be salespeople first. There's not one person we've hired like, hey, do you want to run this branch for us? And they've never done the job first. Yeah. So all of the opportunity comes from within, and it comes from our natural breeding ground of this like chaotic sales role. And if they can survive that, then they can usually take the next step, which for them is becoming a sales manager. That's 2 full-time jobs now. They have to be in charge of everyone else, and then they have to be the top producer from a sales standpoint. If they can survive that, and then the next step would be to be a regional. So then they have multiple sales managers that they lead. They're still the top producer, and they have their own team. So now it's 3 full-time jobs. And if they can survive that, then they deserve to be a partner, right. And they are. And then they're given a partnership role, and they go open their own shop. And in a lot of respects, them going and doing that, like they're just so over prepared for it. Like there's not many challenges that can exist once they've again accomplished that level. So it's something that they build towards. But if you try and take somebody and you try and skip those steps, which is what we used to do, be like, hey, this person had a great rookie sales campaign. Let's go put them in a new city and see if they can run an office. Well, that's when that foundation crumbled. It was like they have to go through those foundational steps to get to the place where they can start their own thing. And so that for us was just like a learning experience and a learning curve. And I don't make it mean to make it so specific about our industry, but keep in mind our industry that we're in is all I know. Like it's the only thing that we've done, right? Yeah. So that's just the frame that I see everything from.
I mean, I'm pulling so many parallels. I would assume a lot of the listeners are too, because first of all, sales is at the crux of entrepreneurship.
Yes.
And then secondly, like what I'm hearing and I want to pull out is first and foremost, there's no shortcuts. Few parts. One, I definitely felt like I was able to take shortcuts in certain areas of my life. And it just always ended up coming back on me. I need to go and put the work in.
Yep.
And then life opened up the next door.
That's it.
It's again, you played a video game, you try to do the thing, and then you're like, no, you got to go back and you got to go do this quest, and then you can move forward. Yeah. I think that's been very clear in my life is just don't. And why do you? Because the journey is the best part of the whole thing. I relate it back to like GTA. I don't know if you ever played GTA.
No. I mean, the last video games I played were a little older than that.
Well, anyway, in GTA, one of the big things that I know I did, and a lot of guys do, which is fascinating, you would go online and you'd search up cheat codes, right?
Yes.
And you get the cheat codes, you put the cheat codes in, and then you can get like unlimited money, you can get any car spawned in front of you, right? And that's what, it's like, oh, let me just get the mansion. And then once you get that, the game instantly becomes less fun. So it's like, well, why did you get the cheat codes? You just ruined the fun for you. Yeah. But you're like, oh, it's going to be great. Which is an interesting concept in and of itself. But shortcuts, there are none, right?
Yes. And so you invited me to a conference in Tulum. Mm-hmm. I have to say I was reluctant to go because I'd never gone to a conference outside of my own companies. Yeah. And it's called the Founders Club. And shout out to you guys for building that and creating such a incredible community. But one of the things that I learned quite quickly there was people that had experienced success quickly and it happened for them fast. There was a great deal of, they called it grief, which I thought was an interesting word choice. Like I was just like, that's so interesting. Once they sold their company and moved on, they felt this great loss and they felt this emptiness. And I thought, again, that was super interesting to me because to me, I've been focused on a potential exit where we have this big event. And we've had a couple in the past, but they were small and compared to what this, hopefully will one day be. And so that was just very much eye-opening to me of just like, hey, I better enjoy this right now. Like I have 500 university students this summer that I get to teach and mentor. Wow. That's what I like to do the most. Wow. What's going to happen if you sell this business and that all goes away? And when I talked to people in Tulum who'd experienced that, again, I think it was Mike Fata who mentioned showing up at his company and not having a role there after he'd sold it and just the feeling of loss that came from that. That was very eye-opening to me. Mm-hmm. So that was something that I haven't been active in my past is connecting with other people that are on a similar path and similar journey as me. I didn't see the importance or the relevance of it. Like for these people are selling food products online. I was like, what does that have to do with my service business? Well, the real thing or the real takeaway for me was just getting to see other people and their journey through a private equity buyout, their journey through a strategic buying their company. Like seeing those things was just very eye-opening to me. And focusing on the journey was what I learned from that because it's just like, hey, you shouldn't bundle it all until the end when it's fun and you get to sell this and you get to be incredibly rich. Like, again, the real joy and the real fun is in the building process and dialing in on that. And again, focusing on that is only going to make the exit better. And so why not be more, just day to day in the business, not just thinking about the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. So that was a big takeaway for me, at least in Tulum, which, amazing event that you guys put on and organized and did such an excellent job of and just got incredible people there. There's the other thing is just from anything like that, similar to that I have attended, I felt like there's people that tend to want to go to those type of events to talk about it and maybe aren't the most effective and they don't really do it, but they like to talk about it. Those were people in the Founders Club that do it and have massive businesses. Yeah. And there's so much that you can learn from people who take time out of their busy schedules running their companies to then go and just like connect with other people that are doing the same thing. So it was hugely valuable for me. And I, as you know, became a member immediately after.
Yeah. I love that. It's actually a concept I speak a lot about called cross-pollination. because I think a lot of us in our, for no, wrong of our own doing, this is how our minds work. Like we're selfish beings. And so we try to look for who is like us. And there's layers of like us in business, right? There's like, okay, same industry, like best case scenario is that you go talk to another successful pest control company.
Yes. Yeah.
Great. The next best is like home services. And then the next best is, just a business of your size, et cetera. But at each stage, even when you get further apart, different, I think, benefits, or I should say insights, unlock as a result. Mm-hmm. The one thing, and this is why I use the word cross-pollination, is I'm in my world, I'm doing the pest control thing, and in your case, like that's literally all you've done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so now you're like, this is the way of being. And I see all my competitors, this is how they're doing it. It becomes the echo chamber of how to operate, for better or worse, but it does. And then when you enter into someone else's world, all of a sudden they're like, dude, you're operating like this is how we're operating. And it's like, oh wow, oh my God, like I could, and then all of a sudden you're seeing, because you're an expert in your field, you're then pulling the parallels and seeing how like, dude, if I implemented this thing in my world, oh my God. And you look at globalization as a whole. If you look at companies that start in the U.S. and then another company or another founder comes from, say, Europe, sees what they're doing in the U.S. and brings it back, and they're just like, oh, this is amazing, I'm going to go and do it in Europe. It's the same kind of concept, and I think people undervalue intermingling with people that are really not like them.
Yeah.
And this just goes for even just like how you show up, because one of the big things that I've learned is you don't know what you don't know.
For sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And it comes down to business. It comes down to you operating as a human, as, in our case, like as men, as partners in relationships, intimately, et cetera. But it's cross-pollination, having that open-mindedness.
Yeah, man, it was just, again, something that I felt so ignorant about after. I was just like, I can't believe that I've been so close-minded to, like, again, just getting out there and connecting with people. I mean, part of the other thing that I learned from that experience is what people do after they sell their businesses. And a lot of people fall into problem after they sell their business. I've seen that in the U.S. I have a couple friends who sold big companies down there, and it led to nothing but, drugs, alcohol, bad decisions, and too much time on their hand. Mm-hmm. And from, Aaron Spivak and also Mike Fata, their new path that they're taking after selling their companies is just that they're very focused on building community and continuing to be able to teach and train people, but just doing it more universally with any type of business. And so that was almost a vision for me, where it's just like, hey, maybe post selling my company, that's something that I could get involved in. More specifically, wanting to just teach and train surrounding sales, wanting to teach and train surrounding entrepreneurship. And so it kind of also gave clarity about like what might be next, and that was hugely valuable for me. So yeah, thanks again for,
of course,
getting me there.
Yeah, what got you there is at least a smidge of open-mindedness. I would say a lot.
Yeah, but I'll tell you, I was pretty closed-minded when I showed up, and the first activity was a cacao ceremony. I was just like, dude, this is not for me. And also, too, you'll remember I was sick.
Yeah.
And I just about threw up the cacao.
Wow.
I was like, that would be an awkward way for me to start this conference.
Hey, nice to meet you.
Yeah. So, yeah, but I mean, what an experience, what a group, and congratulations to you guys for the Founders Club and what you've created. Mm-hmm. Again, I'm just looking forward to being a part of it moving forward.
All right, so this episode is sponsored by Above Men, where we help you self-actualize and ultimately just become the best version of you. So if you're looking to surround yourself with other men that are on the same mission to mastery, get coached by myself and my team on how to step into that best version of you, not once in a while, but every single day, or you're just looking to come to more in-person events that you can connect with more, again, like-minded individuals, then head over to aboveclub.co, get in contact with us, or reach out to me on Instagram at Cam Russell. That's Russelle. Let me know you're interested, and we'll get you hooked up, whether that's coaching, the community, our next event, and I'll see you on the other side. Back to the podcast. You build this whole thing up, you go and sell it, whether it's you or someone else, and we're kind of talking on this. And again, this is the dream. If anyone's wanting to get into entrepreneurship or just like live a big life, like at some point we want a boatload of money, whether that's in a lump sum or like over time. Like money obviously creates freedom in a lot of ways, but it doesn't always create happiness, even though that I think it does, and it can be a tool for, provided happiness. Like you mentioned, you've seen some people that's not the case. We're talking about grief, et cetera. Now that you've been exploring this idea, like what Why do you think that is?
Yeah, I think it's, again, just not focusing on the journey, but focusing on the end result can lead to that emptiness. And so to me, it just brought it back to like, good gosh, like I need to focus on the here and now and the people that are a part of this company and forming relationships with them. When your team is 700 people, you could spend your entire year getting to know your 700 person team. And for me, that's what I pride myself on, is getting to know and having a relationship with everybody in our company. And that should be where I'm focused, not on focusing on an exit and counting the money that would come with that. The other thing that I think I learned is just that I feel like there's a lot of regret that can come from selling the company. There really seemed to be. And that's partly reading between the lines of what I was hearing from those who had done it. And it's just one of those things where there's so much that you give up. I mean, Mike, again, Fada referred to it as his baby. And to me, like, my baby is 19 years old, you could say, so it's not a baby anymore. But having said that, like, I don't want to let it go for so many reasons too. It's just like, again, you get so much value, you get a part of your identity, you get so much from what you create, and to just sell it off and dust your hands of it and probably not agree with where it goes from there and how the new people run your business and your company, that would be very challenging for me. And so I'm just trying to be very cautious in the approach to it. I think that it's easy to only think about the money, but not the people within the business as well. And what does it look like for them? Because those people are my family and friends that operate the company. And I think, just going back to that quote, and the thing that's gotten me, the success that I've experienced is helping them get what they want out of this opportunity will ultimately probably get what I want. And so whether it's the sales partners or the people that operate the company, finding this to be best for them is probably going to be what's best for me. And if you approach most decision-making from that lens, I think it can be really beneficial to you. And it's a weird way to look at it, but I think it is been the case for me. If I put the people around me first, it usually works out best for me, because that's delayed gratification and sometimes kicking your own rewards down the road, but it comes back. And it comes back through loyalty of your people, comes back through, again, just different opportunities that come from that. I mean, I think that the other thing that you'll start to experience, like as your company continues to grow, is the opportunities that come to you once your company is big compared to when your company is small, just starts to explode. And you're just like, I can't believe all of these different things that are popping up and presenting themselves as an opportunity, because you've grown all of these people that care about you and want to work with you. I mean, we were able to open our company in Melbourne, Australia this winter. We opened in Australia. Never thought I would do that.
Yeah.
And we were able to do that just because some of the connections that have come through the business and by putting the people in the business first. And those opportunities start to show up when, again, you just put your people first. So I think that goes with any decision, but certainly the decision to sell it is who benefits, and are you putting yourself first, or are you including the rest of the people in the organization in that decision-making process?
Is there a way that you've been able to maintain that mindset? Because first of all, that's going back to boy versus man psychology, back to your instance of needing $50,000. Like again, you had to go beyond yourself and serve others before you served yourself.
Yeah.
Simon Sinek, the book, Eaters Eat Last. Like there's a lot of that. And there's times to lead from the front, right? Go out, knock the doors, and there's time to lead from the back, where it's like everyone eats and then I eat last.
Yeah.
How have you, through the years, specifically when things have gotten tough, continued to just be like, I know I'm getting a beating here, but I'm just going to continue to hold through.
Yeah.
What's going through your mind? Like, how are you able to do that?
Short answer is like, be okay being broke at times, because the cash flow in any business is going to go up and down. And there's times where it was very lean. And that's a weird perspective that you don't necessarily want people to see that are working for you, when you can barely pay your bills, but the company is starting to grow, because we're in a subscription model business. And that means that there's a lot of costs up front for then to make back the profit on those costs up front years sometimes down the road, always down the road, actually. So that means that you have to be okay with being very lean, even broke at times, to get to where you want to. And when you scale so fast and you're bootstrapping, you're going to be the last person to get paid, if you get paid. I didn't pay myself for 6 years.
Wow.
And that was because I believed in what I was building, and that in order for me to continue to retain the people that I truly believed in and were truly very talented, I understood that this was my thing, not theirs, and they had to be paid what they were worth, and that meant that I did not get paid. And being okay with that is, again, being comfortable with risk, because that's a huge risk to not pay yourself for 5 or 6 years, but it's worth it if you're committed to your vision. And that's not something you need to advertise to your staff. Like, you don't have to be like, hey, look, man, I'm not even drawing a paycheck from this thing. But I think it can be something where, hey, like, you don't want them to see you living the life while you're building. And so, I mean, we drove a Honda Civic for 3 years, and that was interesting because our company was like valued at millions. But just because it's valued at millions doesn't mean that you have those millions of dollars in the bank. You have them in a subscription model business from an exit or down the road if you hold it. So that's difficult for people to understand. And so it's one of those things that maybe you keep a little bit internal. Maybe you don't share, hey, you know, I'm going to skip lunch today because I know I don't have any money. And so I think it's like a fine line. And so I've seen the other side of that. Infamously, there's these 2 guys in the U.S. who they sold their company, and both the partners, they bought Lamborghini. And so it was one of those things where initially it attracted people to want to be part of their new brand that they were starting because, like, hey, they drive a Lamborghini, and they take lots of pictures of them driving their Lamborghinis. It quickly became apparent, though, that was all they had were 2 Lamborghinis, and that was an incredibly unwise financial decision. And the business was one of those things where, again, it was all smoke and mirrors, and it looked bright and sexy, but it had no good financial backing. And so, again, paying yourself last, reinvesting into your business, delaying gratification, especially in a subscription model business, that's the only way to build it. Because if you actually want it to grow, it costs money to grow it. And you need to continue to put that money back into your business, not into your Lamborghinis or your car collection.
100%. Again, this is why I love entrepreneurship. If we were to look at this sort of lens of self-development, you're talking delayed gratification, and that goes the same thing. If you want a great physique, right? If you're a little bit chubby right now, you want to slim down, what do you got to do? You got to put in the effort, and you're probably not going to see any, immediate results in terms of at least the image that you have in your head, the shredded, six-pack, whatever. Delayed gratification, in whether it's your fitness, whether it's starting a business, whether, even investing in a relationship. You go on 20 dates, so you expect the first date, all of a sudden you're going to fall in love. Well, that's not the case. And unfortunately, a lot of guys do think that, right? They're like, oh, I love her. Why does she love me back, right? And so delayed gratification is a huge one I'm seeing. And also being willing to invest. It's huge. And again, it goes parallel. It's like, I forget who was talking about that. It was in Tulum, one of the speakers that are like, how much have you invested in your business this year? How much have you invested in yourself? Like, if you are your business, and a lot of entrepreneurs concur to that, for better or worse, right? It's like, oh, no one can do my job better. But it's like, then why aren't you investing in yourself just as much as you're investing in your business? I think that's a huge parallel in entrepreneurship is like, great, invest in your business, get the newest equipment, expand, hire people, but also figure yourself out, like become a better version of you. And that becomes financial investment, a time investment. Sometimes that's all it's needed, right? 2 huge pieces.
Yeah, you hit on a ton there. And the first one that jumps out is, again, just patience. I mean, there's just so lacking with a lot of the, young people that we work with. They want it to happen immediately, and they want it to happen overnight. And so it's funny, they'll sometimes take an opportunity elsewhere because we're telling them, hey, you're not ready for like what you want yet. And so they'll be like, oh, screw you, I'm going to go do this other thing or work for this other company. And so that patience is important. And I think sometimes you just have to learn that the hard way. I mean, I did 2012, right? So you overexpand, you have some success, and it goes to your head. That can be super negative. And again, it's like, it's funny how good for you the losses are and how bad for you the wins are, or at least they can be.
Seriously.
So that was one thing that, kind of learned over time. And then when it comes to separating yourself from your business, I think that can be really important, but also hard to do. I mean, you're not going to have balance. You're going to have seasons. And those seasons are going to be, for us, it's just like our summers are busy season. We have 500 students that come on for the summer, and I'm not going to be a balanced person. I'm going to be focused on my business for those 4 months. Immediately after that, we move to Mexico. We live in Tulum. We stay there for 2 months. Now, we still are going to be focused on working on our business, but we're going to do it at our pace on our schedule. During the summer, I'm traveling all over all over the country. I'm doing everything that I can to possibly make the experience better for the people that signed up to do it. And that's not going to allow you to focus on yourself. After that, the next season is like, okay, now I need to focus on myself. I go to Tulum because it's so easy to get healthy there. There's healthy food. There's unbelievable gyms. There's just a vibe and a culture of people that want those things. They want to be healthy and they want to focus on their business. So to me, that's like, again, those different seasons of life. And right now in the new year, January is always a crazy season for me because it's like, okay, you're recharged, you're ready to go. Now it's time to get serious about 2025. And so January, I push myself through extremely long days so that I feel like I'm just ramping up for the summer. So now it's kind of just like steadily ramp up, be a little bit more disciplined, no more alcohol, like there can be over the holidays and through some of that time where you're just kind of a little bit more relaxing, trying to smell the roses and enjoy life. Now it's about getting disciplined and getting serious. And then same thing with fitness too. Unfortunately for me, at times it will fall to the wayside. And again, this was a big topic at the conference in Tulum because it was centered around mind, body, and business. And body suffers for me during the summer. It's just going to be how it's going to be for me. But then it becomes the priority in the fall to get back into shape. So to me, that's the only way that my business, which is somewhat seasonal, can work within my other things that I want to be focused on. So I just live it for the summer. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to focus only on this business for the summer, but then the rest of the year, I'm going to be focused on other interests and hobbies and things that I like to do and myself. So again, that line gets pretty blurry at times for an entrepreneur, and I think that that can be okay. I think work-life balance can be very hard to achieve, but a work-life integration can be very beneficial. For instance, my wife and I, as you know, run this company together, and that may sound like it could be a hard thing on a relationship. It's the best thing for our relationship.
Wow.
We have a common goal that we're working together on, and we go through all the wins and losses together. We're so close from all of the things that we experience together in our business. So it's just like my brother. He runs this region, so he runs all of Ontario. And same thing. I see him at the office every day. I wouldn't see my brother every day if my work and life weren't integrated. So although they're not balanced, they're integrated, and for me, that works.
Dude, that's so good. My one of my buddies, he's like, show me a relationship that works when both of them are, run business together. I'm like, dude, there's so many.
Oh, man.
You just stacked another rock on that. Because I'm a big believer of how you operate, is having your partner. Obviously, you guys, I'm pretty sure, met through this.
Yes, we did. Yeah.
Wow. Pest control has given you a lot, eh?
Dude, it has. And we always joke about it because there's so many relationships, babies, marriages that have come from like the people that we brought together to work in the company. And that's really special. Like,
totally.
We see that every year. So it's just exciting to foster that community. And like, as the CEO of Vantage, my job is to drive the vision and the culture. Those are the two things that I'm focused on. And I think a big part of the way that you do that is you just make it so that the people who work within the company get to interact and like each other. So that's a big part of what I focus on with Vantage, is just like, okay, my job is to make sure that the company has an awesome culture. Part of the way the company has an awesome culture is that it's super competitive. Like the whole summer, all of their results are posted online in real time.
I love that.
They all have an app. They can log in. They can see where they're at compared to the next person that they're selling across. We set up tournaments. Again, those are live and in real time. They're team and individual. As you know, you've competed in some of those. And again, that competitive culture, when they all meet up at the end of the year, that we go down to Tulum as a company, it's so cool for them to be like, hey, you were on my team for that. Like, nice to meet you in person. Yeah. But we're able to establish a culture for a national company, and we do that through the integration that happens through competing, and they don't even meet each other in person. They're just seeing each other's results online. So it's like that culture, driving that, being focused on that is a big part of my job. And it's a weird thing because being a CEO with Vantage feels very natural for me. Like, I feel like it's my perfect role. On the other hand, being the CEO of Insight, which I also am, is not the best role for me. And so you mentioned it earlier, identifying, like, again, maybe what your limitations are, and if somebody is better for a role has been something that I think I've become pretty good at, and not taking the approach of like, nobody knows my business better than me. There's a lot of people that could run that business better than me. And so recruiting those people and attracting them comes down to your culture. So you can have an attractive culture where when you put up a job posting, like, people are like, your phone's ringing. And your phone's ringing because they've been able to see online and through your social channels, like, the culture that your company has. If you don't have that culture, you're not going to attract the right people. And if you don't attract the right people, you're going to be doing it all yourself. and it's not going to go very far or scale very fast if that's the approach.
Oh yeah, so good. That's the one thing I admire a lot about what you've built, and similarly with Chris Thompson and Student Works.
Yeah.
Both of you guys have done such a good job at. Again, in my world, I call it gamification, right?
Yeah.
Like that gamification is just something that's so
Yeah.
built into our core of when you use the word compete, like even right now, like I kind of get lit up,
Fired
right?
up.
And I love that.
Yeah.
I this actually ties into a really important piece of self-awareness. You're talking about seasons. You're talking about, instead of, which I love, by the way, and I fully buy into, not life balance, because I actually don't think there is.
I might have stolen
balance.
that from you. Did I steal that from you?
I don't know.
Okay.
I definitely, again, I don't think there's any new ideas in the world, only, right? And so instead of life balance, we have life integration. I like that word. Another word that I heard from, I think it was Scott Galloway, he called it life harmony, right? Because again, harmony isn't at all times balance, but it works, it flows with one another, right? It's always in this state of congruency almost. I think it takes time, and that's something that I've really found myself nailing lately, because I've put a lot of work into this and I've studied myself as a result of what I do. Is like seasons will always come and go, whether they're like more rigid like you know that season, you can get really good at like flowing through those seasons.
Yep.
Or it's a season of like, hey, this is my business now, then I'm going to sell that and move to this, and that's a new season. Like there's seasons within seasons and da-da-da. But the self-awareness piece comes into it, is like knowing what season you're in, knowing the identity you need to take on. So it's like, hey, I'm going to be BQ that goes hard in the summer, and I'm going to be out knocking doors. I'm going to be sharing. I'm going to be the CEO.
Yep.
And then, BQ that's going to be the relaxed guy that's in Tulum, whatever. But the self-awareness is the piece that allows for each of those to happen.
Yeah.
And partly, I'm sure you learned through trial and error, right? But partly it came from, once you did, it was being aware of what did work. Okay, this feels more right when I'm doing this. This obviously isn't going to work. That I can't commit to being the most fit version of myself, or being 100% dialed on my nutrition. Just not going to work. Okay, let me make some changes. I think a lot of guys put a lot of pressure on themselves to be the same level of operating all the time. And I've had to tell guys that I'm coaching, it's like, dude, like, how do you stay so dialed in all the time? Like, listen, I'm not, first of all. But what I do is I go through seasons. So that a lot of what you see is like me being really dialed in because that's my season right now. Great, you might not be in the same season as me. But what is that baseline? I talk a lot about this, like the non-negotiables, right? It's like each season has some sort of non-negotiables, whether you consciously create them or not. All right, for you, you know what those non-negotiables are. You wouldn't let yourself probably go past a certain point, even if you say fitness isn't my number one priority. Great. But there is a point where it's like, if Jess saw you walk in and you're, 20 pounds overweight, you're probably going to be like, hey, I'm going to actually notch this up a few priorities and do something about it.
Yep.
So why wouldn't we, if that's the case, why wouldn't we get really clear on consciously creating our non-negotiables and then knowing when those seasons start and end? Right? And I love, because again, you've been a vet in doing this now, you've probably have a pretty good idea, and correct me if I'm wrong, like each season, you're like, okay, this is when it starts, this is when it ends, this is who I'm gonna be here, this is who I'm gonna be there. And I think life gets a lot easier and more enjoyable when you know when to flip it on and off, especially as a high performer, right? Because as a high performer, dude, if we don't give ourselves permission to shut off, we won't shut off.
I mean, that's just such incredible advice that I wish that I had heard when I was younger. Because, it's now that I have these seasons. In the past, it was just like go until I couldn't.
Burn out, and then that's your season,
Yeah, and the burnout was terrible. Like, I mean, if you do, again, I would, especially in the most intense building years, I would plan to work 16-hour days, six days a week. And truly, like, I know some people will say that, but I mean it. Like, that's the days, and doing that for 4 months was the goal, right? I would often hit just like a breaking point. And I also just realized I was less effective. Like I would show up to a new city and be like, okay, here we go, get pumped up, go do an awesome sales meeting. And if I had just, again, traveled all Sunday, didn't have a rest day, had worked like 100 hours already that week, the quality of that work that I could complete was just so different from what it would be if I actually took care of myself and had some balance. Like again, you're gonna let some of it fall to the wayside as you're just focused on building, which I think is fine for a short amount of time. But eventually it catches up, and it's bad when it does, because you just recognize you're not at your best. You're frustrated because you're not at your best, And you're like, I wish that I had that advice, because again, I've learned that the hard way. But I think just how you said that, just again, being able to be self-aware enough to understand when you've hit that wall so that you can take a step back is something I've gotten better, but it's taken me 16, 17 years to be able to do that and to be able to structure my years in a way where I'm not going to be a shell of myself come the end of the summer and get 20 pounds overweight. Because I would actually.
Yeah.
Like during the summer, I would put on weight because I was traveling and I was living in hotels and airports, and access to a gym is easy. Like there's no excuse. You can still do it, right? Yeah. But it's a little harder when you're on the road, and that's where the habits fall apart a little bit. You don't have a fridge like you're living in hotels. So that used to be my summers, and for a 4-month period, I would be quite unhealthy. And so now it's about like, okay, let's structure the summer out in advance. Let's set the travel schedule up in advance. Let's make sure that we have like a place that we know in each city that we can stay at where we know that we have access to good food. And part of that is just through experience. Like I have a restaurant and a hotel that I stay in every city in Canada now. And then when I travel there, it's just like I have my routine built in from the previous years that I've traveled to there. But again, that's just come from experience of traveling a lot. So
yeah. So yeah, again, if you're listening, everyone experiences seasons.
Yeah.
And it's just a matter of the frequency that you go through them. But I even think, again, that there's a good hermetic principle, universal law, whatever you want to call it, as above, so below. Have you heard of that before? It's basically talking about the concept of whatever happens at the smallest level will also happen at the largest level. It's just a matter of if we can see it or not.
Yeah.
So basically, long and short of it is like patterns occur on all ranges of time, size, whatever.
Yeah.
So it's like if the physical seasons are a thing, like winter, summer, whatever, then in some way, shape, or form, we as humans will go through seasons. It's just like a law of the universe.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, then it makes sense, like you're speaking about, instead of trial and error and just letting ourselves burn out, let's figure out a way to actually like manage these things that are inevitably going to happen anyways, and give ourselves a better shot at just staying more consistent. When you did ultimately burn out, how did you find yourself coming out of that?
Yeah.
Because clearly you did, and you kept pushing.
Yeah.
But that's not an easy thing, and a lot of entrepreneurs and high performers, whether you're an entrepreneur or not, deal with that because we just put so much mental load on ourselves.
For sure.
Physical exhaustion, and then it just, we snap.
Yeah.
What were you doing?
There was two things that would pick me back up, and one was the competitive side of me, where it's just like, hey, I'm not going to let myself be bested with the people who I'm competing against, which for a lot of the time, there's realistically no one. But in my mind, there was people that I was competing with, right? Yeah. And they were actually in the United States running completely different companies, and they were not direct competitors. But to me, it's like, hey, I know that so-and-so is getting up and working hard today. If I want to achieve what he's achieved, like I have to do the same thing. So part of it is just like getting back to refocus and be disciplined and just like be like, okay, you may not be motivated right now, but you're going to be disciplined right now. And you're going to do that through, again, the competitive streak that you have, just where you don't want to be bested by the people that are doing what you're doing. You want to do it on a bigger level. And I don't know if that's healthy, but it is the answer to the question. That is how I've kind of stayed at it for so many years, at times where it's just like, I would rather stick a needle directly into my eye socket today than get in front of 15 demotivated salespeople and try and convince them to go knock doors all day in 100-degree heat, right? Like that's the job, traveling from city to city to do that. And staying motivated doing that can be difficult when you just don't have any gas in the tank. And they're so receptive of your energy. So you just have to somehow find that energy. And for me, again, it'd just be discipline over motivation. And just focusing on competing in any way that you can find, any possible way to compete with anyone out there, whether they know it or not. Yeah. So I guess that would be how I would approach that.
Yeah. Man, I think competition's a great way to do it.
Yeah.
And I would say, is there other ways to complement that? Certainly. From my approach and why I feel like I've been so... I've bounced all over the places. The one thing that I was looking for that I never felt like I fully got was operating in alignment with my values and what like really makes me tick, and now doing the work and figuring that out for myself, and now helping a lot of other guys go and figure out what their values are. And it sounds very bland or broad. It's like, what do you mean your values? You know, is like, am I an honest person?
Yeah.
Like it's the things that are like mean the most to you. And when you do them, a good lagging indicator is that you feel most energized, most aligned, and most alive, right? And for me, I just had this burning desire to just continue to seek out opportunities until I like landed in front of my values, and I was in a position to operate within my values day in and day out more and more frequently than things that aren't valuable to me. So one thing you mentioned earlier is like, hey, CEO of Vantage, absolutely love. CEO of Insight, also great, but I clearly am more drawn and feel more aligned to this role.
Yep.
I bet you if we unpack that, you're doing your values, you're operating your value, you're teaching more. Again, and it sounds like, again, you've had great self-awareness, you've understood what those are, teaching, coaching, I'm sure there's some other things.
Yeah.
And so I would also add to what you said is competition's amazing. You know, I think Michael Jordan era, right? Like that, have you seen the documentary?
Oh God, yeah.
What he says, and I took that personally.
Oh,
you know?
Dude, that like, so I have to tell the story, but when I was
please.
12 years old, and this will date me, but Space Jam came out, and I was 12 years old, which is like the most ideal age, right, for that movie to come out. That year, I got to go to see the Chicago Bulls playing in Chicago. And we went to Michael Jordan's restaurant before, and he walked right past our table. Really cool experience. Then we go to the game, and he set a record that standed for 20 years after, and it was the most points ever scored at the United Center. He scored 53 points against Grant Hill. And before and after, the biggest like person that I've tried to draw from with a competitive spirit has been Michael Jordan. Now, of course, that's like unhealthy for him at times, and it's unhealthy for me at times. Like, again, I'll get into competitions with people who have no concept of the fact that we're competing in any way, shape, or form. But it keeps me super motivated, and it keeps me in a position where I'm more disciplined and focused on, again, what the goals were that I set. And there's nobody more inspirational when it comes to being a competitor and hitting goals than Michael Jordan. So to me, he's always been like the biggest possible inspiration, and I'm a huge Michael Jordan guy.
Yeah.
So anything that he's done, I've always followed, and there's nothing like that. When The Last Dance came out, like I watched it front to back, and it came out at the perfect time. And it was right before our biggest season.
Wow.
We had a massive sales season, and I just went in and I was just like fired up, like kicking over water coolers and correlation fired up. Like, been a few years since I'd pulled out some of those stops, but dude, it just was like, I don't know, like I find it easy to get motivated, and the way that I get motivated is just by like competing.
Yeah.
And if you always are kind of sitting that, you know, white rabbit that you're chasing, there's always somebody doing it bigger or better. That'll just kind of keep you going to the gym and focusing on yourself and getting better in your business, and, you know, give you a standard to follow. And, you know, same thing. And like, again, if those people that you're, you know, chasing or competing with will engage with you and teach and coach you, dude, even better. Yeah. Because then you're stealing their secrets and using it against them. They don't know that you're competing, so it's fine. But that's been, I guess, the hack for me, is just to compete at everything and be focused on that. And when you approach it that way, you find yourself jumping out of bed. Yeah. Not crawling out and being like, oh God, another day of this. It's just like, here we go, baby. Like, you know, you're just feeling inspired. So
I love that. And I would double back down to the values component, because from my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, you've been pretty blessed to set up a job and a business that your role really allows you to entertain and engage in your values.
Oh yeah.
Alongside the competition.
Yes.
I'm not only going to compete, but I'm going to compete and do the things that I love to do in the competition.
It's so fun, dude. Like, honestly, you feel like you're like what we do, sales, it is a sport. Yeah. Like in every way, shape, and form. And I feel like Roger Goodell, the commissioner at times, where I just get to structure these tournaments and encourage beefs between teams and sales reps. And we have a thing in our company, it's called Throwdown Thursday.
I love it.
And it's just like some rep or salesperson will challenge another salesperson, and the loser has to shave their head, or they have to do an ice bucket challenge or whatever, right? But that stuff, like when your culture is like, again, it starts to be driven from the people that are a part of it, not just from you. That's when it's hit like a kind of new level. And a lot of those competitions will become informal, and like our reps will die to not lose. Like they'll go out there and work 13, 14-hour days, because if they lose, they have to drink a blended Happy Meal,
Sure.
which is one of the other punishments, or they have to like shave an eyebrow or like something dumb, right? So like that level of competition is just fun. If you treat your business like a sport and you're competing all the time, again, it just feels fun. It feels easy. Everything's gamified. But you talked about the student painting world, and we both started there. You at StudentWorks and me at College Pro. And you also talked about values. And at College Pro, they'd had this like great program for teaching you how to run a business. You didn't make a ton of money, but you learned how to run a business. No disrespect. College Pro has been like hugely formational for me. And I learned so much about how to start a company. And they teach you and they show you how to do that. But they also teach you, and they have 3 core values that they established. And when these hit at 18 years old, like they haven't changed. These are my core values because I adopted them from College Pro when I was 18 years old and I was running my first painting franchise. And it was deliver what you promise, which again is so important to expectation setting where anybody that comes into your organization. Respect the individual. Again, just so important to being successful as an entrepreneur. You have to respect your lowest level salesperson the same way you do the CFO or the most important person in your company, right? And so that was another core value. And I'm blanking on the third, which is horrible right now.
Who's got it in the comments?
Well, anybody from College Pro from those years should be able to help me out. But there was a third one, which I'm blanking on right now. But again, those core values being taught early and formally in how to run a business is what those student painting franchises teach you. And they also teach you how to like live and die by like your own results because you're running a business. Like there's no pay if it's not successful. Some of the franchisees will lose money doing this whole thing. And again, hey, that's formative. Like that can be good or bad. Like I was fortunate I made a couple bucks doing it, but it was also a substantial amount of work that went into making those. But more importantly, I learned life skills that like I'll never lose. And that was more important than making a couple bucks during the summer. So those student painting franchises, College Pro and StudentWorks, there's just so much value that a student can get out of those.
Oh, huge. Yeah. And I would say your organization as well, right?
Yeah. I mean, ours is similar. I think if a student's going to like, okay, what am I going to do this summer? I really want to level up. It's like, I think there's College Pro, StudentWorks, and I think there's Vantage in Canada. Yeah. If you're wanting to get into entrepreneurship, I think those are 3 of the decisions. If you want to learn how to be an operator and how to operate the nuts and bolts of a service business, I think College Pro and StudentWorks, there's no better place. Yeah. If you want to learn how to manage yourself and you want to learn about sales, I'm biased in saying this, but I think Vantage is a great place for that. But if you want to be a business owner, if you want to be entrepreneurial, doing something with your summer like those things, or going and do your own thing. Yeah. I know a couple students who started businesses. One is a student named Jacob, and he started a company called Aspect Home Services. It's a barbecue cleaning company. And dude, he's ripping.
Really?
Like, it's crazy. It's going to be a massive business.
Wow.
In Ontario this summer, he's going to have 30 or 40 people that are working with him. And he's only been doing it for 2 years. That's crazy. He's 19 years old. Wow. And again, just finding a niche little service, finding something easy to go out there and offer. It's a great way to learn about entrepreneurship too. You're going to take the hard lessons if you go do it by yourself. Yep. That's fine. You might lose money doing it by yourself. That's fine. Again, as long as you can find a way to get back into school the next semester, you'll be okay. Yeah. For me, that was just that I didn't get my exam results back because I wouldn't pay my tuition. And I don't know if you've hopefully never been there, but if you don't pay for your tuition, they don't kick you out of school. They just don't give you your exam results. So I would have to sign up for classes not knowing if I had passed or failed the other class. And so there was more than one time where I ended up passing the same class twice because I thought that I failed it, but I was behind on my tuition by so much that I needed to, again, take care of those debts before I could.
Wow. Wow.
But again, like, that was early in the College Pro days where it was just like, hey, you got money at different times of the year. Yeah. Like with running a business, again, when you start up, most of the money that comes in goes right back out. And that's the case with any business as you're starting it up. And that's not very conducive to paying tuition sometimes. So I was willing to just roll with those punches. I was just like, again, what I had to do to get established in starting a business. So.
Yeah. I would say the doing both, and obviously you doing both as well, one of my key things is like, StudentWorks, like you said, great from like a place of operations and the kind of the full gamut. the one main thing I would say that you have over an organization like StudentWorks is the travel aspect. And back to where this whole conversation started, when you flew down to Florida, I went to Vancouver. Like, if that's something that's inside of you that you're like, man, I really want to leave the country or leave my hometown, I personally would recommend going and doing Vantage if I'm a young guy and I still don't know what, I'm going to do with myself. Because across the board, all three organizations, great at building skills. One's going to keep you in your hometown. The other one's going to allow you to go and explore, which is, I would argue, just as valuable if we're optimizing for skill set, developing and exploring the world. So just thought I'd throw my 2 cents. If
hey, I agree with you.
Yeah. Obviously, you're in a place of exploration with moving from the potential of just only doing this business to potentially finding a partner to acquire the business and when it makes sense. Pending we're taking care of our people, et cetera, which is in line with you becoming potentially a father and stepping into another huge role alongside potentially something else with the exiting of your business. Like, first of all, how are you thinking about fatherhood? And then I want to ask you about like the next chapter, because obviously fatherhood's a huge piece. And any guy that has the ambition of having kids, which I think it's buried deep inside of us. I see it now that I've started to get some of the rungs checked off of my foundations, see it as a very, very exciting and privileged part of a man. Would you first of all agree on that?
Oh yeah. I mean, 100%.
Yeah. Amazing.
So I'm so fired up for it.
Amazing. So it's like, how are you thinking about it? Like, and I'm just given that like entrepreneurs tend to be like this.
Yeah.
How are you almost like strategizing for it and like getting ready for this period?
Well, it's crazy how much strategizing we're doing. I mean, Jess and I, again, we're business partners.
Jess is
and Jess is a wildly intelligent, skilled, and competent person. And so when we approach a project together, like, it's planned out.
Yeah.
Like, we've been talking and thinking about this. And so we have a couple great models to pull from. And first is my dad. And the best advice that my dad has ever given me is to not give me advice when I've asked for it.
Ooh.
And it's wild how much confidence that can instill in you.
Yeah.
When you ask your dad, like, hey, Dad, what should I do? Like, this is a tough situation. He's like, I don't know. He's like, what do you think? You're just like, well, Dad, I'm asking you. He's just like, no, like, I think that you probably know best. You're closest to it. So my dad, just by the lack of handing out advice, just made me very confident in my ability to make decisions. So good. And then my mentor in business, I've also just learned a lot about family from him. He's a Mormon guy. He lives in Utah, and he's got 5 kids. And I mean, the life that he's created with his kids and for his kids is amazing. And it's not through wealth. He's exceptionally wealthy, but the kids are not. They're treated in a way of just like, hey, you eat what you kill. Like, hey, I'm rich, you're not, kind of thing, which is awesome to see. But they give back. And the way that they give back is it's structured and organized every Sunday. And this is partly through their church, but it doesn't have to be. But every Sunday, they're driving around their city, Salt Lake City, going to different families' homes, checking on seniors that they work with, bringing hot meals to people. And that servitude that comes through that, whether it's through religion or not, is just like a big part of how we'd want to be focused on, like, again, developing young people, developing our kids. I mean, what we've done for 19 years is like develop young people at the university level. Now we're just like, okay, time to have our own and just like be focused on them and just create, somebody who, we just think is, the person that we would want them to be. And I think the way that you do that is by expecting a ton, showing them that they can make decisions for themselves, encouraging them to be confident, encouraging them to take risks and not be afraid or not make decisions based on fear. And so those would be some things that we're focused on. But the other thing is that, like, this is just a personal thing, but we want them to be born in the United States because the back and forth for us between Canada and the United States was always a lot of work. So hopefully Donald Trump doesn't take away birthright citizenship, which he's talking about, because we have it all mapped out where we're going to have our kid in the U.S. and then give them that gift of having dual citizenship. But, so we better get cracking.
Yeah, gotcha, man. And for you, like, what are you most excited about being a dad?
Yeah, I think it's just, again, I mean, the easy stuff, it's like the coaching aspect of it. I grew up playing sports, as I mentioned, and doing that kind of stuff. I'm seeing my buddies back home do that, and there's just so much that they take from that. And my dad also coached me throughout my, athletic career. So I think, again, it's that, but it's the lessons that come from that. It's not just like, hoping that they're great at sports. In fact, with my height and genetics, it's likely that they'll be a trier and not a athlete. And so I think the lessons that come from that, because as I mentioned, the first thing I talked about is learning about leadership. You learn on a field or on a court or on the ice. And I think there's so much from team sport that somebody can draw from to be successful in anything in life. And some of those things that they learn is how to prepare themselves to go perform. I think that's an important part about business. I mean, sales meetings are a performance. You got to hype yourself up for them. And if you're an athlete, you have experience doing that. Being part of a team and knowing how to put your teammates first. I mean, again, we've talked about that. That's super important to being successful as a leader. And then being a leader, the most important thing is if you're the leader of a team, anytime you win, credit to the team. Anytime you lose, I've messed up. Yeah. And I think that that's so important. So those are the things that I'm excited about, is just to teach those lessons that I have been teaching admittedly for a long time, but to teach them to your own flesh and blood is a different thing.
Yeah, I love that. So first of all, quickly, is this a decision of hey, we're now ready to have a kid because we see the end of this chapter happening? Or what made you decide on that? Because for me, I'm also, I would say, making a very conscious choice of when that's going to happen for me.
Yeah.
Where was the decision made for you and Jess?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's funny because anybody watching this is like, yeah, right, they're really going to have a kid because he's been saying that for 7 years. next year. We've been saying that for 7 years. And so I think we're just tired of putting it secondary. Okay. And we've realized it's time to put, family first and be focused on that and to have kids. And, again, we get encouragement from Shandon, who I mentioned, the gentleman who has all the kids south of the border. And he's just like, you guys are depriving, your future children of everything that you can put into them. It's just like, you have to do this. You guys, it's very complimentary to hear when they're just like, you're going to be the best parents, the best team. How are you not doing this yet? And so, the other part of that is the business is to a point where we feel we wouldn't be ignoring the kid, and we'd be able to put them in a position to really focus on them and be involved with their life, because the commitments aren't as heavy day to day as they have been in the past. So it's partly that. And it's that annoying thing where everybody says, you're never going to feel like you're ready, just do it, right? You hear that a lot. I don't know if you hear that. Yep. I can tell you our parents say that often. And to us, it's just hey, we know that we're ready. We've been ready. I think that the decision that you make in your spouse is it's the most important decision you make in life. Yeah. And I'm fortunate to have knocked that one out of the park. My wife is
Shout out Jess.
Yeah, she's the smartest and just most impressive person that I've ever met. So when that's rock solid and your relationship is rock solid, there's no reason to not have kids. And again, the thing that we see as a benefit going into being parents together is a lot of parents have never worked on something before. They often have separate lives. And for us, all we've done is work on projects together. And so our good cop, bad cop that we can play, our, hey.
This kid's in for a treat.
Yeah. So for us, we're just hey, we have so much practice working together. Let's work on this new project together. Yeah. And we're pumped for it.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Yeah, man. Again, it just goes to another check for getting into business with your partner. Hey, you want to have a great child, go and do amazing things, go practice on a business, right? Yeah. It's just, I'm in such belief on it. And I feel we could have a full podcast on how you've managed, because I'm sure there's also been a lot of failures and ups and downs with that.
Yeah. But you win and you lose together. And again, with your partner in business, and of course in life, part of the way that I think best decisions are made for both your business and your spouse is, do we want the same things? So important. And if you want the same thing as your business partner for the business, then hey, it's probably going to be successful as long as the sacrifices to get there are the same. And then with your spouse, I've had previous relationships where we didn't necessarily want the same things. And when that's the case and your goals don't align, good luck making it work. And if you recognize that in a relationship, I think you owe it to the other person to get out of that relationship as soon as you can. Yeah. Because the likelihood of it being successful, at least in my experience, are very low. If you do want the same things, lock it down and just move forward. But I think having those honest conversations early could be, unsolicited dating advice just to getting out there and getting started. And I don't think you start the date with like, so how many kids do you want? Like, you don't want to scare them off. But I think it's one of those things where if you can be open and honest about like, hey, like, the conflicts that I had in previous relationships were like, hey, I'm about to go on a work binge this month and I'm going to work pretty much every day and I'm going to be on the road the entire month. And that caused huge conflicts in previous relationships where they're like, what do you mean? Like, no, like that's not a normal way to live life. But in my current relationship, with my wife now, it's like everything that we do is aligned. Any sacrifice that I make is for her and vice versa. So if we're sacrificing, it's not a selfish sacrifice. It's a sacrifice that we're making to better our own life and our own future. And everything aligns. And a best business partner that you can have is somebody who every interest because what can happen in a business partnership is sometimes the goals and the visions do not align, and one partner wants to get a different thing from the business than the other partner. And if they're at odds from what they're trying to get out of the business or do in the business fails because there's just not that unity. Yeah. But when your partner is your wife or your brother, your interests in life just are so aligned that of course your interests in the business are going to align too. It just syncs up. So I know that people will say, hey, family and business don't mix. Like, I would very much disagree with that. My business is a family business. And the way that it's worked is because I know that I can just, at the core of it, trust them in the worst scenarios to tell me the truth, to have my interests at heart. And you can't do that with a partner that you don't have a previous relationship with. So if you partner somebody right off the bat, even if they're super talented, the likelihood of it working is just difficult. And I've seen that too. We've partnered with people who were just like, I cannot believe this person is willing to partner with us. They're so ahead of where we're at. But those partnerships didn't work out as well because, again, the interests were different. We wanted different things out of it. And so it falls apart. So at least from my experience, that relationship that you have with your family in a family business just does nothing but bring the family together. You share all your wins and losses together.
Yeah, I'm on the same page. I think the reason it works is because, the deeper you go with alignment, the more motivated we are to all go in the same direction for a longer period of time, right?
Yeah.
Couple rapid fire questions about your relationship. One, your Mormon buddy, 5 kids.
Yep.
How many kids do you want?
Oh, I want at least 3.
At least 3.
But we're starting a little bit later, but we also see no reason to not have multiple kids. Like, we're just like, hey, like the best gift that my parents gave me was my brother, who's my best friend.
Yeah.
So it's just like, I can't imagine not giving them multiple built-in best friends. So
yeah, I love that.
Dude, I love to have multiple.
Yeah.
As many as possible.
Yeah, I'm on the same wave. I think the more the better. And again, part of the reason entrepreneurship is so great is if you can create your destiny and you have the financial resources, like,
that's right.
Dude, what an amazing life if you had five of you running around.
There's no bottleneck financially, so we're super fortunate to be in that position. So it's almost just like, why not?
Yeah. Would you adopt?
Whoa, I've never been asked that question, and I haven't ever really thought about it before. I don't think I would, and I hope that's not the wrong answer. But again, I don't know that I've ever thought significantly or deeply enough about it.
I think it is something you need to really understand the crevices to.
Yeah, and that's maybe bad that I've never thought about that. But no, I don't think that.
It's good. You've burned the boat. You're all in on having your own. Yeah.
Guess so. Yeah.
Given that, how long have you and Jess been together now?
12 years.
So you mentioned something really important is like, hey, if we're both going in the same place, just like lock down and commit. And I heard this thing from Alex Schmozy said at a certain point, you have to choose loyalty over novelty. And I think that's really good because as guys, we like, hooking up with multiple girls, it's exciting, et cetera.
Yeah.
But also at a certain point, again, loyalty becomes more valuable for many reasons. Given, again, 12 years in a relationship, you've clearly found a great fit for you two. Would you say, now looking back, that it's more important to find someone that's like 70% match in terms of checks all your boxes, but you guys are both going after the same thing, and you're very aligned long term, but maybe there's some things that just don't quite line up right now. You're like, we know we're going to the same place. Would you rather take the 70% person and do it earlier, or try to wait and get someone that's like 80, 90%, no one's perfect. We're never going to get a perfect match.
Whoa.
But then you have to wait 3, 4, 5 years. Maybe you only knew Jess now for 6 years instead of 12. What do you think? What would you go after?
Dang, I love that. I'd definitely say 70% because you're most influenced by the person that you're married to. Like they say that you kind of become and pick up traits from your spouse. And with Jess, I mean, we both become the best versions in a lot of ways of each other and ourselves. And I think you adapt, as do they, through that relationship and that partnership. So for me, I would say definitely the 70%. Because we didn't start out as just like, hey, do you want to start Canada's biggest residential pest control company together?
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't like that was immediate or that took time, like that vision to evolve. But it was clear to me that Jess had the thickest skin and the biggest ability to bounce back from difficult situations. And because she was so resilient and so unaffected by anything that had happened in a negative way, because at times she had a difficult childhood, those were things where it's just like, wow, like she's so tough and so strong. It's just like, that is what I want in a woman. And back to the novelty over loyalty. The novelty expires so quickly, but I almost think that that's an important part of a boy's maturation. They almost have to experience some of that novelty. They have to go out and have the, not thinking maybe with their head or their heart, but another part of the body. And for them to have those interactions and experiences, it helps them kind of find out what they do and don't want through, again, dating a bunch of different girls early in life. I think that you start to learn, hey, okay, well, I like this thing about this person, but maybe this other thing I didn't really see in it. And again, when a guy gets a little bit older, they stop making decisions based on just appearances, and they start to think about, okay, the quality of the individual and the person that they're dating. And when you put that first, it's like, okay, the quality of this individual and their toughness and what they've been through and who they are as a person. When you start to truly think, okay, that's how I'm going to base this decision, that again is the most important decision that I'm going to probably make in my life. If you're really focused on the content and the quality and, again, those aligning goals, I think that for me was how I made the right decision. But I had to make some bad decisions, just like in business, so that I could understand what I truly wanted and what was truly best for me for life. Because I do view it as an absolute, like, non-negotiable. It's a lifelong commitment. So you better be sure. And we dated for a very long time before we got married. I think 8 years.
Yeah, I love that.
And so to us, it was just like, oh, we knew like a few years ago. But I think within the first 6 months, I didn't know. And just like you kind of put on a bit of a performance, I think, in the first 6 months when you're dating somebody. You're trying to put your best foot forward. You aren't maybe as authentic as you are later. And I think Jess and I both felt like that way about each other. It's just like, oh, like, you're actually like this, where you kind of presented yourself like that for the first 6 months. But like, again, I think that making those decisions over time, based on quality, based on content of the person, their character, and again, not on the novelty, is super important. And I mean, Jess is the most loyal and dedicated person I've ever met in my life. So it was just like an absolute no-brainer for me. And it's annoying when guys hear this, because I used to hear this because I was single for a long time. And guys would say, oh, yeah, man, you know when you know, bro. You just know when you know. And that's so annoying to hear.
Yeah, well,
but it's also true.
Yeah.
Like, it's also like, I hate to say it, but it is true. Like, for me, it's just like, oh my God, I've never met a caliber of woman like this before in my life. This is just different than anything else I've experienced. I know that for sure, and I knew that very early, that this was it. And that's annoying to hear, because like, until you've experienced that, you're like, yeah, right, dude, I'm sure. But then when you know, it's just kind of the truth. At least it was for me.
Wow. Well, I love that. What, after 12 years of dating, what do you think is one of the number one trait that has allowed you guys to be steady?
Yeah, I think it's both being able to recognize that the other person needs to sometimes put themselves first in the relationship. And I mean, Jess and I will not spend every waking second together. And again, some of that is okay. And again, it leads to a very healthy relationship where we're both very excited to see each other. And that's not because we're spending every waking second together. It's more because, again, when we are together, we're just intentional about it. It's like, okay, like, let's turn the phones off. Let's focus. Like, let's be present. Let's not be focused on other stuff. So getting better at that, I think, has been important. And then again, it just is that we just want the freaking same things. Like, it's mostly that. It's just like we want to do the same things. We want to accomplish the same things. We're focused on building this project together. And again, that just brings so much closeness through the wins and losses, the ups and downs. You never run out of things to talk about. We have a team of 700 people.
So good.
It's just like, oh, can you believe what so-and-so, like, there's so much like work gossip and fun stuff to just chat about with each other. Like, it's funny, like, we'll go out for dinner sometimes and we'll sit beside a couple and, you can see that they have nothing left to talk about. Yeah. And that's depressing.
That's one of my biggest fears.
Same.
One of my biggest fears.
It used to be.
Yeah.
But because now we go to dinner and we're like back and forth like the whole time. But it's because like we have everything in common. So we have so much to discuss.
Good. And good.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a weird, again, work-life integration too, because especially in Tulum this last year, Jess is busy at different times of the year because she works on different parts of the business than I do. And so the fall can actually be quite busy for her. So we were actually at the resort that the conference was at in Tulum. I can't remember what it's called.
Amansala.
Right. So we were at Amansala, and it's a beach club during the day. And so I was just like at the beach club during the day. Jess, the full day, was taking calls from the beach club, working the entire day.
Yeah.
And again, it wasn't annoying to me in any way, shape, or form because it's our company together. So it's just like she had to make some sacrifices that day. She wasn't going to put that on me. I was just like, chilling, like just sitting there. And again, being able to divide and conquer, being able to like just know that, you're matched up with somebody who's pure, like, if not, greater than, equal to, was important to me. Just like I wanted somebody who was like inspiring, like the stuff that they were able to accomplish and do was motivational to you. Those were things, again, that were important to me. So yeah, I think, again, you don't realize that sometimes until you're a little bit older. It's the novelty is kind of what you're more focused on. But hopefully, a guy can get past that and through that, and then to the other side where they're focused on loyalty and character. I think when they do, that's usually when relationships work.
So good. My grandpa, who had a relationship for 50 years or 55 years before my grandma passed away, they said relationships are a lot like compound interest. And it just gets better and better and bigger leaps over time, which as young people, it's almost hard to imagine is like, how can two saggy bodies, enjoy life better than these fit bods? But I think that it changes with obviously you as you age and then what is important to you. And then also that bond just becomes so deep that you can't even imagine what that would be like when you first start, right? So like I said, I think we could do a whole podcast on relationships, especially because you're in business together, so there's so many layers to it. But to wrap things up, I want to leave on a hopeful note of looking ahead. And again, we've been dancing around the idea of like you coming into this next chapter, finishing this one powerfully with an exit. What are you've mentioned coaching, you've mentioned teaching, but like, how are you seeing approaching this new chapter? Because obviously, again, you're doing your due diligence, you're doing some research, you're talking to guys that have exited, but like, how are you approaching this? And more specifically, like, you're getting onto social media, which is one of the things that you haven't done, but you clearly see that as a valuable component. So like, how are you approaching this? And clearly there's some new skills that are involved. So like, you need to throw yourself back into the learner's seat a little bit. Like, what are you doing to manage this almost identity shift in a way, right? It's very much what it is. Because again, if you're listening, it's not that, I'm not going to exit a business, this isn't relevant to me. It's like, no, like Brendan's about to make a change in his identity, in his career, and how he sees the life and what you do day to day. Like, how are you approaching that? Because you're doing it very consciously, it seems like.
Yeah, I'm trying to. I think one of the things I've learned is that when you get into another industry or a new project, just because you're good at something else does not mean that you're going to be good at what's next.
So good.
And so part of that means that you have to be super humble. And all of the hard lessons that you took on your first project that was successful, you're probably going to take a lot of those over again. And that's really challenging. Because when you start something new, and for me, like I am trying to, get into social media a little bit more. I'm probably not even using the best terminology there, but I realize that I'm absolutely terrible at it. And that's frustrating because I feel like I'm really good at what I do and what I've done for 19 years. Of course, I'm not good at this new thing. So the first thing is like a humble approach and just an understanding that like it's what you post on day one is not going to be where you post in 19 years. If I do this for 19 years, I can only assume that I'll probably be really good at it. And anything I decide to do, I'm taking a long-term approach to it. Now, it doesn't mean I'm going to do it for 19 years. Mm-hmm. We've spun off into other industries. Like we this past year, we did some marketing in solar right, yeah. and also in telecom. We had a marketing contract for TELUS, and we sold their smart home security services. And yeah, we had mid success. Like it was like, okay, we made some money there. In solar, we flopped. We could not transition into that new space. And that's just like such a good reminder of like, hey, whatever you do next, you're not necessarily going to start at the top. Because we are at the top of our space right now. We have the biggest residential pest control company in Canada and the biggest door-to-door sales team in Canada. But again, that was after 19 years of building. So if it is like, again, okay, I'm going to, want to do what I want to do, which is I want to teach and I want to coach and I want to mentor, the best way to do that is to gain some visibility online. Mm-hmm. So that right now, the people that I coach and mentor, they're just people who work for me or work for our company. So that's natural and easy for me to find those people to work with. Again, what Mike Fata has done is he's had to rebrand from his company to his own personal brand. Now, that'll be difficult for me because I've been very reluctant to talk about the results or talk about the success. To me, and my mentor from the US, again, Shandon Cole, he doesn't do any of that at all. He's like a bit of a ghost. Like he's one of the most successful people in the industry. And he never does any talks. He never is on social media. We've had to force him onto our own podcast. Like, it's like he's very like build in silence and build, behind the scenes and build in quiet. And that's been the way that I've approached it for 19 years. But I learned in Tulum that if you do want to continue to have people to teach and mentor, you have to have a little bit of a presence on social media to attract people who want to learn from you. And that also means that they need to know why they should learn from you. And that means that you have to talk about your wins, not just your losses. And you do have to talk about your success. And to me, that's bragging. And so I'm struggling with that to just be like, okay, here's what we've done. And here's what we've accomplished. It's hard for me to say those things because, again, where I'm from and the way that I grew up, like you don't brag. You don't talk about your success. Like, right. That's not part of what you do. But unabashedly, that's what some of the folks who are teaching and mentoring others in business do. I mean, they start with it. Yeah. Their social media handle says exited business for $100 million. Mm-hmm. Like that's up front and center. Because if you want to capture an audience, talking about why that audience should listen to you is a pretty important part of that. Yeah. So that's the part I'm struggling with. And that's the part where I'm trying to get, okay, how do I do this in a way that, feels authentic to me? Because up until now, it's been difficult to do and I haven't done. So I think that's part of it is just like thinking about like, okay, how does this look and how would it look for me and what brand or image would I want to project and create? And up until now, the brand and the image has been the company. So transitioning that, if it transitions to that where it's my own brand, that to me would be challenging. Mm-hmm. But I'm trying to engage with that and learn from others. The reason I met with Mike in Winnipeg, traveled there in -40, not just to meet with Mike, but also, we're opening a new office there.
Gotcha.
But was just to not pick his brain, but to ask him what he would do if he were in my shoes. Mm-hmm. And he had awesome advice on that front. And, hey, I felt weird about this too. And Mike's 50. And he talked about, he's 49. Mm-hmm. He's about to be 50. Mm-hmm. Be insulted, I'm sure. But he talked about, hey, look, like, I didn't have social media. Mm-hmm. He's like, I didn't have an account. He's like, I started a LinkedIn account. And then I just started to tell my story that I used to tell at trade shows, which is actually, I could relate to that because it's how I used to tell my story at job fairs. And he's like, now I just do that online. And it's attracted a whole different bunch of groups of people who want to learn from me on how to help them create their business. And it's also presented opportunities for investments for me. And all of that was because I took this leap of faith, decided to stop being shy, and just put it online and put it out there. And I've also learned that from you. I mean, I've seen the evolution of the content that you've been able to create, and it's evolved. Mm-hmm. When you started, you probably look back on it and think, hey, I'm not as good at this then as I am now. And I've noticed that. And so that's inspirational to me too. Where it's just like, okay, you're going to just have to start.
Yeah.
And we found that with our own channels for our business. Like when we started them, we had one follower. And it's a weird thing to advertise. It's knocking doors, selling bug spray for crying out loud, right? Like it's not sexy or cool. But over time, over many, many years, it actually has become a cool brand. And it is something that is attractive to young people. Yeah. Again, I'm just realizing that anything you start that's new is a process. You're going to have to start from the bottom. And being humble enough to do that when you've already experienced success at something else is the challenge. And that's what I'm going to focus on. It's just like, okay, I'm going to be horrible at this when I start, just like anything, but I'm going to build this skill through repetition and just, again, trying over and over and over. Because I've filmed now tens of hours of content and I've released 0 hours of it.
Which is all good though.
Yeah, no, you got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
And so once I'm finally, because I'm a bit of a perfectionist with it, once I finally get one where it's like, okay, I'm happy with this take, finally, then I'll actually put it out there and hopefully really get started. So I'm excited for it. It's a new challenge. And again, you need to keep challenging yourself so that you're staying fresh and developing new skills.
I love that. Before we wrap up, I'll double down on that point from a different angle, which is not only do you need to humble yourself, you're going to suck, but the one thing I find, an interesting part of human psychology is expectations. And a lot of time we are the ones that get to set the expectation for ourselves, for our team, for our partners, right? Yeah. The funny thing that you mentioned with you and Jess is like, hey, if you were this person for 6 months, but you're that, like expectations, right? It's everywhere. And in learning, when you go into this new chapter, when you go into this new skill, I find we bring our expectations about ourselves from this past thing into this new thing, which in a lot of ways can be good, right? Hey, I'm going to have this much success. And you just instantly have that level of confidence, all good. The one area where I see guys just throwing in the towel too much is how quick they should be doing something as a result. Yeah. Hey, I'm really good at this skill, but then when I go and do this skill, dude, it takes me what feels like forever. I felt that when I started editing my own videos for the first time. I jump on this foreign app, I'm trying to piece together all this footage and it's all nuanced. I'm just like, dude, how the fuck am I ever going to do this? I'm like, whoa, this is your first video you've never even opened this app, dude.
I know.
Take some time.
Yeah.
If it takes you all day, all good, because now you got a rep.
Yeah.
Now you got 10 reps. And I bet you on rep 9 to rep 10, you got 10% quicker, right? And I think that expectation setting of dude, you're going to take 10, even potentially 100x longer, literally 100x longer on rep 1 versus rep 1,000, understand that, because you're going to get frustrated and not even get to rep 10 if you don't give yourself the time and mental capacity to just sit there and take a lot longer than you could be doing something quicker, right? I know how to sell at the door. Great. I don't know how to sell online on a webinar to 1,000 people. Probably going to suck. It's probably going to take me hours to put together this webinar. Yeah. So that's the only thing I'd add, because I see that with guys way too much.
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah, I couldn't agree more. And again, just a tip that I again learned from the conference in Tulum was from Jake Carls, who's the founder of Midday Squares. Dude, he's so inspirational. Very. And his message, because I asked him, I was just like, look, tell me where I'm gonna struggle with this. Again, my company isn't a chocolate company. That's so cool. My company is a pest control company. That's not cool.
Yeah.
And he just talked about the fact hey, look, it's not about all of the showcasing that you do that's performative in a positive way. It's it truly is about authenticity and vulnerability and telling the good with the bad. And that is what people want to hear. Think about a movie. He's in a movie, it was just all highlight reels of the character the whole time. That's not a movie. There's highs and lows. And he's just sharing the lows with the highs and the struggle that then leads to success. That's what the viewers want, and it's more engaging. So that was our company is a highlight reel. That's what our socials are. And that's not how it goes if you're going to do something that's more personal. Yep. So that was a huge learning experience for me. And he also just talked about some of the negatives that come with it. He's very well known now as a result of what he's accomplished on social media and in business and in life. And he kind of talked about some of the negatives. And some of the positives for me would just be anybody inside of my company they know who I am. Anybody outside of my company, they probably don't know who I am. And for him, that's not the case. He can go to a restaurant or a bar in Montreal. There's going to be somebody who wants to talk to him. So we talked about how that can be draining. And one of the downsides that can come with personal branding is just that, like, all of the time, like for him, there's people that want to get advice or want to learn from him. And so that's one of the negatives that can potentially come with that. So yeah, that perspective was really interesting. And he's just somebody who's done it in a huge way. I mean, the traction that he's gained on social media is incredible. It's absurd. Like, I learned about him from my dad, and my dad was just like, hey, you got to check this guy out. He's like crazy what he's been able to accomplish with just his business, right? So, but he talked about storytelling, and storytelling means telling the full story. It means telling it authentically. And so those would be a couple of things that I'm just trying to take with me into the new chapter.
Yeah, I love it. So when you inevitably post that first video, where is it going to be, and where can people?
I guess everywhere, right? I guess everywhere, everywhere all at once. So yeah, I mean, I've been working on it. There's a bunch of different themes or concepts that I'm trying to work around. And one of the interesting things is, like, door-to-door sales actually has like a massive amount of content that's on Instagram. Like an incredible amount of content.
Well, I'm sure you've seen Josh Lester and
Oliver.
Yeah.
Oliver Lester actually has sold with us before, and so he's worked with our company a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, what he's been able to do on Instagram is incredible. Having said that, on LinkedIn, which has been the platform that Jake and Mike have leveraged probably more effectively than at least any business owner in Canada that I'm aware of, they have been able to accomplish everything that they did on primarily LinkedIn. And if you go on LinkedIn and you search door-to-door sales, there's nothing on there. Like, there's almost nothing. So hopefully I'm not inspiring my competition right now.
Maybe that's good for you.
I think it's a huge opportunity. And to me, that would potentially be the avenue where, with Oliver, his content is often humorous, and it's often,
it's a different way of going about it.
It is. And I think maybe the vein for me would be, again, just like some of the more not serious, but some of the stuff like that really digs into, again, how to be successful in sales and how to compose yourself to do a proper sales presentation, some of the mechanics surrounding sales. And so he's leveraged it to be a course that people sign up for. And to me, it would be like, I just want to do it open source, because I think that attracts different opportunities in different ways. And so to me, there's a vein there. And so I think the LinkedIn play would be to create constant quality content surrounding door-to-door.
I love it.
Which is starting to grow. Like, it's one of those like things where it's just like, it has a negative reputation because of bad actors in the space and just the way it can be perceived or viewed. And that goes with sales too. Sales is only taught at one university in Canada formally, and that's Ivy Business School. So pretty great school. The person actually who heads that up has been on our podcast. He's just a really inspirational professor. But it's not taught, and it's 50% of people when they enter the workforce are in a sales role. Wow. And you can't learn about it in university. Yeah. So there's a huge opportunity there. A, nobody's teaching about door-to-door sales on LinkedIn. Yep. B, nobody in a university is teaching about sales at all. And I think young people want to learn about it. So I want to teach it. Yeah. Maybe there's a marriage there. I don't know. We'll find out. But I want to find out. And the way to start doing that is to just start releasing content. And I've learned that from yourself and the others who are doing it.
Amazing. So LinkedIn's the main spot. Go give this guy a follow. I know there's some crazy content going to be coming up. Mind you, just like telling more of your story, right?
Yeah, so for sure.
We scratched the surface, and I feel like some of the things that were coming up, I'm like, man, whole podcast on that, whole podcast. So, and hopefully you do tell a lot of those things. But dude, it's been a pleasure. And for me, a very full circle moment, being able to sit across from you and have you on the podcast. I'm super grateful to have your time and your insights and your wisdom, and hopefully everyone feels the same. I know they will if they listened all the way through.
No, it's 100% my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.